Hello, Dr. Lesser.
Are we all here ready to start the meeting?
I had to go find hard candy.
Okay, I see everyone's here. I see Mrs. Sears, Mrs. Hutchinson, Mrs. Richardson. So we will begin this meeting with a moment of silence, after which I'll go through the rest when we call the meeting to order. Okay, so we'll start with a moment of silence. Okay, so then I would like to call the meeting to order. And first of all, the order of items today we would begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. And today we have special families that are helping us out with our Pledge of Allegiance and our national anthem. And so, whoops, I keep using my wrong mouse here. I've got two mouse. They are from the Patterson Elementary School, and it's the Garrett family. They will be leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and it will be Bridger, I'm sorry, I hope I pronounced that correctly, Garrett, Sydney Garrett, and Caden Garrett. Bridger is a kindergartner, Sydney is a fourth grader, and Caden is a sixth grader, and you will see them as a family leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So I'm really excited to see that tonight. Then next we will have the national anthem, and we will hear from, very pleased to hear from Holly Porter and Olivia Porter. Holly is a senior at Westwood High School, and Olivia Porter is a junior from Westwood High School, and we look forward to that as well. So with that, I guess I did call the meeting to order, so that has been done, and we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the
was great. That was beautiful. Thank you so much. That was really fun. Go into somebody's home and have them sing for us, a family. I love that.
Those
Okay.
President Minor, those Porter girls live down the street from me, and they're sisters.
Oh, yeah. Great. I want to mention before we get any further that Mr. Stephen Peterson will not be joining us here tonight. He had something unexpected come up and is unable to be here. And with that, we are going to go to the governing board procedures, meeting procedures. And because we're doing our meetings a little differently, as everyone has noticed, everyone's at home. We're meeting you from our home computers via WebEx or via WebEx. And so with that, we are doing something a little bit different than the normal procedure. So I'm going to read this to you this evening for our procedures in this meeting. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Mesa Public Schools Governing Board. On March 30th, 2020, Governor Doug Ducey announced that Arizona schools will be closed for the rest of the year due to the COVID-19 health crisis. In early April, when his stay-at-home order was issued, governmental functions, including school board governing board meetings, were exempted from the order. So while it is legal to have an in-person school district governing board meeting, our district is choosing to exercise safe social distancing for our meetings by using a virtual meeting platform. The following will be the rules we are using for our meetings. Although members of the board are not gathered in a central physical location, we do have a quorum in attendance at this meeting by video conference or telephone call. We are meeting by use of WebEx conferencing platform and live streaming through YouTube, which allows for members of the public to view and or listen to this meeting. You can access the live stream at www.mpsaz.org/live, and you can see that on your screen. And you are welcome to do so during this meeting at the appropriate times. If you need accommodations, please contact Martha Head at 480-472-0201. Again, this is on your screen. At this time, the board is taking public comment through an online form. You can access it at bit.ly, we call it bit.ly here at the district, /MPS comment. And that too is on your screen. Submitted comments will be read aloud at the appropriate time during the meeting. All other meeting procedures will adhere to board adopted procedures to the extent practicable. A recording from this meeting will be available to the public via our district's Board Docs online software within 3 business days of the meeting. We apologize in advance for any unforeseeable difficulties and ask for your patience as we navigate unprecedented conditions. And I'd like to extend my thanks to all those that have worked behind the scenes. We did this also in our study session, but for those of you that weren't here, we want to be sure and acknowledge them again for all of the hours they put into making this possible. This is a team effort and quite a bit of work. So we appreciate them. With that, we will go to review of agenda on the next item of our agenda. And I don't believe there's any other things we have to review or any changes of order. So we're going to move on to the review of the governing board calendar with Dr. Lesser.
President Minor, members of the board, good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to share what our calendar looks like for the remaining portion of our school year. I want to let you know that tomorrow we will be meeting in what we call an administrative management meeting with all of our administrators via WebEx. We have communicated through a variety of means, whether it be communications, video, through our With Insight administrative newsletter, a lot of information over the past 2, 3, 4 weeks. And we think it's time for us to reconvene this group of 200 plus administrators to touch on some of the most essential areas as we near the end and the last day of the school year. And we will be spending time reviewing those important elements, answering questions, and providing some clarification to our administrators. So that management meeting with our administrators will be tomorrow morning. Then next week, we will have what we call a general administrators meeting. And most likely at that meeting, as we're developing the agenda, we will talk about budget. We'll talk about some of the end of the year. We'll be talking about some of the summertime things that we will be doing in preparing for a new school year. So that is the general administrators meeting. That will be next Tuesday from 9 until 11 with the use of WebEx. We have 2 board meetings this month. Governing board meeting is on May 12th and May 26th. Sandwiched in between those 2 meetings is the last scheduled day of our school year, our remote learning with our students. And then on June 3rd is the ASBA Summer Leadership Institute. I will have Martha Head reach out to our board members to find out who is looking forward to participating in the ASBA Summer Leadership Institute. So that's what the month of May looks like. Any questions from the board members?
Okay, I don't hear any questions, so thank you, Dr. Lesser, for that. I appreciate it. So I guess we're going to move right on to the recognitions. And again, we'll go to Dr. Lesser.
Excellent. This year, we have celebrated 120 years of high school excellence. In 1899, the first high school classes in Mesa were held on the second floor of the Old North Elementary School on Center Street. Over the last 12 decades, our high schools have graduated generations of community members and made our city what it is today. All year long, we have celebrated our comprehensive high schools, including recognizing alumni from each school. Now, due to COVID-19 pandemic, our in-person celebrations were cut short. But tonight, we'd like to virtually honor our 6th comprehensive high school, Skyline, which opened in 1999. Let's watch a short video about our Coyotes. Hit it, Ina.
In September 1899, Mesa's first high school classes were held on the second floor of Old North Elementary School. 10 years later, Mesa Union High School opened in 1909. The school included 12 rooms and a small main floor auditorium. Over the last 120 years, high schools in Mesa have offered robust academics, diverse extracurricular activities, state championship athletics, creative and performing arts, and vocational training. The rich traditions and unprecedented opportunities that began with Mesa's first high school are woven into the fabric of all of Mesa's high schools. Mesa, Westwood, Mountain View, Dobson, Red Mountain, and Skyline High Schools celebrate tradition, innovation, and community. Each with their own unique story to tell, but the same promise of knowing every student by name, serving them by strength and need, and ensuring they graduate ready for college, career, and community.
We are just a really tight-knit community out in the east part of Mesa. I actually teach a lot of my former classmates' children now, being a teacher at Skyline, and it's so neat for me to see how many of my classmates chose to stay in the area like I did and send their kids to Skyline. I think that says something. If you want to send your child to the place where you attended, you've got to be at least a little bit proud of it. And we have so much heart, and I know that I will forever be proud to call myself a Coyote.
I think it was a lot of fun to be a part of the first generations of Skyline. It's one of the newest high schools in the Valley, and to be a part of something new and starting a culture at somewhere new. You know, my dad went to Mesa High and he was a part of that culture, and then I got to start the culture at Skyline and see my younger siblings go through it and be a part of it as well.
Hi, my name is Kennedy McMahon. I am a proud alum of the Skyline High School class of 2014, and it is because of my years at Skyline, particularly those spent in Mr. Ritt's theater class, that I was able to harness my passion and achieve my dreams. And now I am starring in my own show, Nancy Drew, on the CW. So, thank you to Skyline, thank you to Miss Stewart, and go Coyotes!
Boy, I tell you, I never get tired of seeing the rich traditions of Mesa Public Schools and just the wonderful accomplishments that all of our schools, whether they be secondary schools, junior highs, or elementaries, what a great tradition and rich history at our youngest high school, and what great stories. I do have a connection with Skyline High School. I did serve as the athletic director there for the first 2 years when the school opened back in 1999. So it is wonderful to see where they've come from and what the great school that they are today. At a regular board meeting, this would be the time we introduce alumni in the audience and have them stand up and wave. So to all of our Skyline High School alumni, students and staff watching out there, please know we are thinking of you and we appreciate you. You are an important part of our history and community. Thank you to our Mesa community for celebrating with us all year long. And here's to another 120 years of excellence.
I wish there was a way of those canned applaud, right? Yay! Yay, Skyline. Go Skyline. Go Coyotes. Great. Congratulations, Mr. Tom Brennan, who's their current principal right now, who I'm sure is watching and rooting for Skyline. All right. Thank you, Dr. Lesser. And with that, we're going to move on to our proclamation. It is for the Teacher Appreciation Week, and Mrs. Richardson has volunteered to read the proclamation. You're on mute, kiddo.
I have to be in charge of my own stuff. That's really hard. Okay, the proclamation reads, whereas teachers open students' minds to ideas, knowledge, and dreams, and whereas teachers keep democracy alive by laying the foundation for good citizenship, and whereas teachers are listeners, explorers, role models, motivators, and mentors, and whereas teachers continue to influence us long after our school days are only memories, the Governing Board and Superintendent of Mesa Public Schools do hereby proclaim May 4th through the 8th as Teacher Appreciation Week, with May 5th as National Teacher Day. Join us in acknowledging the lasting contributions of teachers to our lives, our community, and our country. Let's celebrate and thank our amazing teachers.
Yeah, I saw Mrs. Sears clapping. Yes, thank you. Everyone's clapping. You know, this is a special time for teachers. This is a very unusual time, just like everyone else. So, because we can usually bring them things to their classroom or go up and give them a hug in their classroom and let them know how much we appreciate it. If it's Mrs. Richardson, you would have a big spread probably at lunchtime or for breakfast, or there's all kinds of celebrations going on throughout our schools. I'm sorry, throughout our schools. And I just want to let people know that they still can. I hope I didn't get lost. I hope I'm still here. Am I still here?
You're good, Mrs. Minor.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I don't see me, but as long as you do, all of a sudden I lost you. Okay, anyway, all I was saying was that this still is a time that you can recognize teachers on May 5th and let them know how much we appreciate. Right now, they're probably working even harder than ever to try to make this work. So with that, I recommend approval of a proclamation in recognition of May 4th through 8th, 2020 as Teacher Appreciation Week, and May 5th, 2020 as National Teacher Day. Do I hear a motion? or
So moved.
all in favor? And then we will start by going around with Mrs. Hutchinson.
Do we need a second, Mrs. Minor?
Oh, I'm sorry. I've got to get back on. That's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to get back onto the meeting because I have somehow been dropped and I'm not sure how that happened. So hopefully I will, you can still see me.
You're still there, Elaine. Look, put your cursor over the little box, or maybe somebody from tech can coach you. I know exactly what you did. It's your little thing in there because we all see you.
Okay. And then I just got.
President Minor, this is Nathan Myers. You don't see your image on the screen?
No, I can join from my browser, but it's.
Okay, down at the very bottom of your screen, there are several tabs. Perfect.
I got it. Okay, sorry about that, everyone. Okay, I'm back.
Oh no.
Okay.
You joined twice.
Yeah, because now I've got an echo.
Oh.
Okay, I'm going to go back out of that. Okay, am I back? Okay, so did I get a second? Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so I have a second from Mrs. Richardson. And so we'll go for the vote with, starting with Mrs. Hutchinson.
Aye.
Mrs. Sears.
Aye.
Mrs. Richardson.
Aye.
And me, and myself rather, Elaine Minor, aye. Okay, then that motion was approved. The approval of the proclamation with a 4-0 vote. All right, so I'm still, I think you guys are doing well with me, even though I can't see a thing, but I'm gonna just keep moving forward. All right, going on to the next item. And that is the consent agenda. All items listed will be considered as a group and will be approved with one motion. There will not be separate discussion of these items unless a board member or citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered as a separate item. Okay, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
President Minor, Kiana Sears, asked to adopt the consent agenda from April 28, 2020 of the regular meeting agenda.
Thank you, Mrs. Sears. Do I hear a second?
Marcy Hutchinson, second.
Thank you, Mrs. Hutchinson. Is there any discussion or are there any questions, or would anybody like to pull any of the items? Okay, I'm not hearing anything. And then there's probably no request to comment on this item. So we will now vote. So all in favor, Mrs. Hutchinson?
Aye.
Mrs. Sears?
Aye.
Mrs. Richardson?
Aye.
And myself, Elaine Minor, aye. So that has been approved with a vote of 4-0. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to the next item on our action items. So now we are at, if you give me a moment to go to my agenda here so I can get all of this after going through the consent. All right. I recommend approval of the minutes of a study session meeting held on April 14th, 2020. Do I hear?
So moved. So
Okay,
moved, Jenny Richardson.
Thank you. A second?
Marcy Hutchinson, second.
All in favor, starting with Mrs. Hutchinson?
Aye.
Mrs. Sears?
Aye.
Mrs. Richardson?
Aye.
Myself, Elaine Minor, aye. So that is approved by a vote of 4-0. Next item is I recommend the approval of the minutes of a regular meeting held on April 14, 2020.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second, Jenny Richardson.
All in favor? I'll begin with Mrs. Hutchinson.
Aye.
Mrs. Spears.
Aye.
Mrs. Richardson.
Aye.
And myself, Elaine Minor, aye. So that's approval with a 4-0 vote. Now we will move on. I believe that's all of them. So we will move on to make sure to the
You have one more.
Is there one more?
Yeah, it's the executive session on April 21st. We have one more approval.
Okay, thank you. Do I hear a motion on the executive session for April 21st?
I move to approve the minutes of the special meeting, including an executive session, which was held on April 21st, 2020.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
I second that, Jenny Richardson.
Mrs. Richardson, Mrs. Hutchinson, all in favor say aye. Mrs. Hutchinson?
Aye.
Mrs. Sears?
Aye.
Mrs. Richardson?
Aye.
Mrs. Minor? Aye. So it is approved by a vote of 4-0. Now we will go on to certificated and classified personnel requests, including an addendum. Dr. Holmes, now maybe I can get you on the screen. Yeah. Go ahead.
I believe I'm on the screen. Madam President, members of the board, we're asking your approval this evening of certificated and classified personnel requests.
Okay, thank you.
Including the addendum.
All right. Do I have a motion for the certificated and classified personnel requests?
Madam President, I need to recuse myself from this vote. This is Jenny Richardson.
Okay, thank you, Jenny.
Madam President, I, Kiana Sears, make a motion to receive and adopt the certified and certificated employees.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Sears. Do I have a second?
Marcy Hutchinson, second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or questions? Okay, at this time, then we will take a vote. All in favor, aye. Mrs. Richardson?
I have to recuse myself.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I meant to say Mrs. Hutchinson. I'm sorry. Mrs. Hutchinson?
Aye.
Mrs. Sears?
Aye.
And myself, Mrs. Minor, aye. So we have a vote of 3 to, oh, we need any discussion now, I guess, but I've already asked for discussion. So any, it passes with a 3-0 vote in approval of the certificated and classified personnel requests, including an addendum. Sorry, I'm still looking at a blank screen, so it's a little rattled. I'll be okay. I'm doing fine. All right, then the next item is the certificated exclusionary list. Would that
Madam President.
Thank you.
Madam President, members of the board, every year, as a reminder, we ask you to approve the rehire of our certificated staff, with the exception of those we on what is called a certificated exclusionary list. This is the list of individuals for whom we only ever intended to hire for 1 year. So with that as a little bit of context and background, we are asking your approval this evening of the certificated exclusionary list.
Great, you guys are all back. I've got you back on my screen. I figured it out. Okay, thank you. With that, do I have a motion for the certificated exclusionary list?
I move that we approve the 2019-2020 certificated exclusionary list. This was Jenny.
Thank you, Mrs. Richardson. Do I hear a second?
Marcy Hutchinson, second.
Mrs. Hutchinson seconds the motion. Do I have any discussion, any questions? Okay, we are going to go ahead. All in favor say aye. We're beginning with Mrs. Hutchinson.
Marcy Hutchinson, aye.
Mrs. Sears?
Aye.
Thank you, Mrs. Sears. Mrs. Richardson?
Aye.
Thank you. And Mrs. Minor, aye. That will be 4 in favor. and the motion passes for the certificated. Now we will move to the classified exclusionary list. Dr. Holmes.
Likewise, as with the certificated exclusionary list, we are asking your approval this evening of the classified exclusionary list.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Holmes. And do I hear a motion?
Marcy Hutchinson, I move for the approval of the 2019-2020 classified exclusionary list.
Thank you, Mrs. Hutchinson. Do I hear a second?
Kiana Sears, seconds.
Thank you. Any discussion or questions?
Mrs. Minor, this is Helen Hollins. We have one comment on this item from the public.
Oh, thank you, Mrs. Hollins. Go ahead.
The comment is from Krista Perhito. There are a large number of preschool aides on the exclusionary list. Can you please elaborate on what is happening with these employees and preschool programs? Many of these people are under the impression that their contracts were being renewed and had not been told otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll turn that over to Dr. Holmes.
Well, I will tell you at the moment, I would not be able to answer that question. If that is an outstanding question that needs to be discussed, yeah, I would have to tell you, you might need to motion to approve it with the exception of those listed out of the early childhood department. And then I can investigate that and bring that back to you.
Okay, to pass, and say that one more time. Dr. Holmes, a motion to pass with an exclusion. Say that one more time, please.
I would say motion to approve the classified exclusionary list with the exception of those listed in the early childhood department.
Okay.
Madam President, and Dr. Holmes, if I may just ask a question regarding that. The exclusionary list is filled with individuals that are 1 year only. And is it incorrect to conclude that part-time employees, whether they be of a certified nature or a classified nature, are designated as 1 year only or exclusionary employees? Would that be the reason for that?
Yes, that's the reason for everybody on this list.
Dr. Holmes, this is Scott Thompson. There are several construction positions on the list as well that may have been included by mistake.
So would we be best to just remove this entirely until the next board meeting, or is there a reason we need to approve some of this now?
We could table this. We could table this entire item until the next board meeting. Top of mind is letter of assurances for our employees. But I think we could manage. We could manage moving this item to the next to the next board meeting to settle these outstanding questions.
Okay, then that's what we'll do. We will table this for the next board meeting. We won't need to make a motion or a vote or anything. We will just table it until the next board meeting. Okay, we'll move on then to item 7G, the 2020-21 Superintendent's Executive Team members and compensation. And I will turn it over to Dr. Lesser.
Madam President, members of the board, thank you for an opportunity to bring this item to you this evening. And if I may share with all of you and our viewing audience a little historical perspective of where we land today with the recommendation for the superintendent's executive team, as well as their compensation for the next school year. When I was hired on December 3rd, 2019, the governing board shared with me their concerns about 2019-20 compensation for the superintendent's executive team. The board requested that I review and provide recommendations regarding unapproved compensation for the team, the size and costs associated with the executive team, and then a recommendation for 2021 compensation for the team members. If you recall, on February 11th, 2020, the superintendent's executive team compensation audit was completed and approved by the governing board. The audit had three main conclusions. There was compensation for 10 members of the superintendent's executive team that did not come before the governing board for approval. The number of members of the superintendent's executive team increased from 13 members to 15 this school year. And the cost to the superintendent's executive team increased approximately $550,000 from last year to this year. The governing board and district implemented two safeguards to properly address the audit findings. All compensation and employment recommendations are posted in board docs for review and approval by the governing board. Previously, compensation amounts were not included in employment recommendations to the board. And the superintendent will meet with the governing board to outline any changes to SET organization and compensation, including a cost analysis prior to approval. On this date, I also brought forward a recommendation for the approval of 2019-20 SET compensation. Your approval resulted in the adjustment of compensation for several members of the SET and the recoupment of overpaid compensation in the amount of approximately $75,000 for this school year. On April 14th, 2020, I provided a recommendation to the governing board to restructure the superintendent's executive team, which included a few title changes and a reduction from 15 members in 2019-20 to 12 members in 2020-21. Now, tonight I bring forward a recommendation for the 2021 SET compensation. And as you can see in the document that is attached to this agenda item, my compensation recommendations include one base salary for each member of the SET. In the past, members of the SET received a base salary and a contract addendum of $30,500 if they were titled as an assistant superintendent, or $28,500 if they were titled an executive director. And both base salaries and the contract addendum were approved by the governing board. In my recommendation, I have combined the base salary and addendum to make one base salary. So in the future, there will be no reference to the contract addendum since it is now included in the employee's base salary compensation. Now, as a result of the restructuring and the compensation recommendations for next year, the cost of the SET will be reduced from approximately $2,550,000 to approximately $2,020,000 for a district savings of around $530,000. One of the members of SET has been moved back into a director position. In that role, the employee will receive about $10,000 more than the existing director in that position. In addition, we will need to hire a director of certified personnel for human resources, which is a position that existed in our organization prior to this year. So, a summary of the savings or the results of the changes from February 11th, April 14th, and my recommendation today. the $75,000 savings back on February 14th or February 11th, the approximately $530,000 savings with this approval today. If we pay a director about $10,000 more in a position that she has moved back to, and we hire a director of certified personnel, probably in the range of somewhere between $80,000 and $100,000, I project that the recommendations that have been made and approved over the last several months will result in approximately just under a $500,000 savings to the district. I would also like to thank the leadership team for their professionalism, support, and leadership during this time. Some of these items are very sensitive issues, whether it was about compensation, restructuring our team, or finding solutions to the many challenges during this health crisis. This team has been exceptional. I have been blessed by the best during my time as superintendent. At this time, I ask for a motion, a second, and approval by the governing board for the recommendations for compensation for the restructured team moving into the 2021 school year. Thank you, Madam President and members of the board.
Thank you, Dr. Lesser. Do I hear a motion?
I move that we approve the 2021 Superintendent Executive Team members and compensation.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Richardson. Do I hear a second?
Marcy Hutchinson, second.
Thank you, Mrs. Hutchinson. Is there any discussion, comments, or questions on this item, or any request to comment? We'll first start with any on the board.
I appreciate Dr. Lesser's work, and I echo his thanks to his team. You know, it is a sensitive issue, and we believe we have the best of the best on our superintendent executive team. And having to make these kinds of changes is hard for a lot of people because we do value their work and their contributions to our district. But wanting to be wise stewards of taxpayer dollars means we needed to figure out a way to keep these salaries more in line with districts around us, what the taxpayers expect of their superintendency. And I appreciate all the hard work that went into helping that happen for Mesa Public Schools.
Thank you, Mrs. Richardson. I would echo the same sentiment that you just shared. I think you did a beautiful job of stating that. And again, I too appreciate all that Dr. Lesser has done. I know this has been a lot of work, a lot of effort by a lot of people, Dr. Lesser in particular. And I know it is a sensitive subject for those that we really, really appreciate everyone's work, everyone's efforts. That never changes. And there are decisions that we make because we have best interests of many different factors involved. And so when we do this, we don't take it lightly. We take it very seriously. We take time needed to look things over thoroughly to see what is the right thing to do. And sometimes the right thing to do is a harder thing to do. And we know that as a board, and we know that as Dr. Lesser knows it too. So we appreciate everyone's efforts. And Mrs. Richardson, did you have a comment to that? Okay. But thank you for all that have been involved in this. Any other comments?
Yes, I'd also like to thank Dr. Lesser for his thoughtful approach. He informed us all along the way. He took our suggestions. He answered our questions. And I think he handled a very difficult situation with a lot of grace. But I'd also like to thank the members of the executive team and echo Ms. Richardson's sentiments. They have, who thought we would have a pandemic in the midst of a superintendent search and at the end of the school year? which is so precious to our seniors, their parents, their families, and all the kids. Who would have thought when they left school for spring break, it would be the last time they'd be at school? And we really don't know what the new normal is going to be. It's a time of uncertainty, but I want to thank the executive team for all their professionalism and the way that they have carried themselves with grace. And I look forward to new, innovative ways to deal with the challenges. And Minor, I would echo that we do have the best team. And I feel confident that with deep insecurities held by a lot of us in the community, that this team will steer us the right way. And I very much appreciate all of you on the executive team. Thank you very much.
Okay, with that, do we have anyone that has asked to speak outside of the board? Any other requests to speak? Mrs. Hollins?
No, there's no public comment for this item.
Thank you. Then we will take a vote.
President Minor? Oh, yes. I'm sorry. After the vote, I just wanted to mention something.
Okay, you ready for after the vote?
Yes.
Mrs. Minor, if really, if we have a second, or if we have a motion and a second, the discussion really should all pertain to this item prior to the vote.
Right. Okay. So with that, do I have the vote would be all in favor, say aye, starting with Mrs. Hutchinson.
Marcy Hutchinson, aye.
Mrs. Sears. Thank you. Mrs. Richardson.
Aye.
And Mrs. Minor, aye. So this motion has been approved with a 4-0 vote of approving the superintendent's executive team members and compensation. Okay, with that, we will move on to the next item on our agenda.
President Minor, this is Casey. I apologize for the previous interruption, but I did want to just point out that in item 7E, the motion inadvertently indicated it was for the 2019-2020 school year rather than the 2020-21 school year. If you wouldn't mind clarifying that motion and vote.
Oh, okay, 7E. So that is the certificated exclusionary list that you're referring to? Okay.
Yes.
And we need a clarification from someone on that motion. Do I hear that? A motion?
I think I made the motion and I read it the way it was typed in our minutes, but you're right, it needs to be a different year. So I amend my motion to be, I recommend the approval of the 2020-2021 certificated exclusionary list.
Do I hear a second?
Marcy Hutchinson, second.
So that's a motion from Mrs. Richardson, a second from Mrs. Hutchinson, and now for the vote. And I would say all in favor, aye, starting with Mrs. Hutchinson.
Aye.
Mrs. Sears?
Aye.
Mrs. Richardson?
Aye.
And Mrs. Minor, aye. So that is a vote of 4-0 in favor of approval of the certificated exclusionary list. Thank you, Mrs. Gregson, for pointing that out, bringing that to our attention. Okay, we are going on to discussion items, and that would be number 9A, update on school closures. Dr. Lesser.
President Minor, members of the board, thank you for allowing me to share just a few thoughts before I toss this one over to Dr. Forlis, who has really just done an exemplary job of leading our efforts through the coronavirus and the big 5 topics and how we get resolution to some of these very complex issues. I'd like to give a shout out to our information systems group, our IT area. During the week of April 13th to the 17th, 40 IS staff members worked with 112 site staff members to distribute nearly 2,000 devices to 12 junior high schools. And each handout took about 1 or 2 days to prepare before we ever arrived at the junior high school. We've had one-to-one texts see 220 students about their devices. They've handed out 80 more devices and swapping out 109 chargers. Nearly 500 staff devices have been distributed. And a couple weeks ago, I talked with you about our food and nutrition group and being heroes of our district. And I don't think we toss that word around lightly, but this group, led by David Sanders and Helen Hollins, are heroes as well, just in another area of critical need to create equity across our district in our 7th and 8th grade areas, providing kids with access to remote learning through digital means. And I want to tell you that when they began this discussion, it was in days that it was organized, scheduled, communicated, and ready to be implemented. And their work is just stellar. They don't say no to this difficult work. They found out a way to do it well, to do it timely, to keep people safe. They implemented safety protocols that did not compromise workers at the school or within their own department. And so I give a shout out to this team, these leaders, for just an exceptional job under pretty challenging circumstances. And the solution was remarkable. So thank you for allowing me to share that information and then toss it over to Dr. Forlis for the rest of the update.
Well-deserved recognition, Dr. Lesser. Thank you very much for allowing me to walk us through what we have referred to as the Big Five, and you will see tonight it is the Big 5+1 presentation on our school closure update. We will hear from Dr. Tracy Islas and Mrs. Teresa Baca about learning resources. Dr. Sean Holmes will walk us through employee matters. Mr. Scott Thompson will walk us through facilities updates. Mrs. Marlo Loria will share updates regarding community partnerships. And Dr. Tracy Islas will be taking the stage on updates to policy due to school closure decisions. And our +1 this evening is titled End of the Year Celebrations, and that will be a tag team between Mrs. Mrs. Holly Williams, we do have Heidi Williams, Mrs. Holly Williams and Mrs. Hollins, who will add some flair to the presentation to let you know about what we can expect for end of the year celebrations for students and staff. So Nathan, if you will advance to the next slide. Thank you so much, Dr. Tracy Islas.
Good evening, President Minor, Dr. Lesser, Dr. Forlis, members of the governing board. Just a couple updates for you this evening as we are moving into week 5, 6, 7. We're not really sure anymore, but we have come a long way. As Dr. Lesser said, things were scheduled and up and running, and here we go. So just a recap on where we're at right now. Wanted to share just a little bit about some of the professional learning that our leaders, our teachers, our support staff have been involved in. And this is really just a short recap of all the things that everybody's been participating in since we launched phase 1 of our plan. And so, as I shared previously and a couple weeks ago, all of the websites and training that we've provided for our certificated and classified staff, just a quick snapshot on the integration of technology. As we know, this is a new normal, and we are so proud of the work that our school staff members have been participating in all of these different trainings in a variety of formats, whether it's through WebEx, through webinars, just different kinds of courses that the departments across teaching and learning, special education, ed tech have put together And a quick little number there, you can see some data that over 6,000 participants are engaging every single day in some of the EdTech online courses. 4,700 in some of the Google Classroom and Google Suite opportunities as teachers are learning, and even our support staff are learning how to engage kids in Google Classroom and Google Docs and Google Files and Sheets and things. And then the virtual training webinars are something that the EdTech team has been putting on. They've got a calendar of their website, and folks can just jump on for quick little 30 to 60-minute snippets for learning about just whatever they need to know right now to do a lesson or a unit the next day. And we've got over 1,000 folks that have participated in those opportunities just over the past couple weeks. And then over 3,000 participants. And again, this is just through what we're recording in our Grow learning platform. And teachers are also doing professional learning across different kinds of sites and webinars and things that outside vendors are sharing with us. But other sources such as Sanford Harmony and some of the social emotional tools, some things that our partners such as Everybody Matters is putting on for also ways to engage not only our students and families and ensuring that we're participating in keeping them healthy and well, and how to deal with this COVID-19 crisis, but also for themselves and opportunities for them to participate in ways to cope with how do I manage all of these different things, being a mom, being a teacher, being a partner at home, and then participating in learning and planning lessons and things. So just a quick snapshot of where we're at with some professional learning. And then Nathan, if you want to head to the next slide. Again, super excited as teachers and leaders are now sharing and collaborating the different tools and resources that they are learning about, that they're trying at all different levels. A virtual remote learning environment is very different than a face-to-face. You can't just recreate a lesson that would have happened in the classroom. And so we are starting to capitalize and collect some of those resources, and we'll be sharing some in the administrative content. There's some links in the notes for you board members if you'd like to take a look at just some examples of teacher videos and counselor lessons and all sorts of things where you see a little picture of a kid there texting his work to his teacher. The Everybody Matters webinars and things that are capturing different ways to connect with kids and ensure that they're safe, how our staff members can engage in opportunities to learn how to deal in a stressful environment while still, being ready for their kids. We had the opportunity last week, our administrators participated in a session with Dr. Doug Fisher. He worked with us on some teacher credibility and what that looks like in a remote learning environment. And it was really an opportunity to hear some different strategies to not only help our teachers be credible for our students and ways to engage them by ensuring that we call them by name and we show our faces so that it's not just this voice speaking at them from a screen, but how do we intentionally plan environments so that kids feel connected? And it led to how do we help our administrators also get through this crisis? And Dr. Fisher talked about compassion fatigue, which is the mental, physical, and emotional exhaustion that comes with working with people who are in constant states of distress. So different than burnout, but when we're leading folks who are in these stressful situations, how do we provide supports and strategies for them as well? And in talking with our director, Dr. Mike Garcia of Opportunity and Achievement, if you were to visit the Opportunity and Achievement website, you will see the multitude of resources that are posted there. And just to capitalize a little bit on that work, the counselors, the social workers, and all of the support staff are doing things like providing lessons for teachers to share with students. They're reaching out with students through WebEx opportunities and counseling sessions. They provide weekly YouTube and Facebook sessions for families and teachers to jump onto. And then even some of the counseling resources through our partnerships that we have for our staff members, our leaders, and then for our families as well. So I would encourage you to take a look at their website. I'd be happy to share a summary of all of the opportunities that we're providing, and we'll continue to share with our leaders so that not only can they help their staff and their families, but also engage with themselves as they're working through this stressful time and working in a new world. And best engaging our kids as well. And just an update, we're working feverishly on our plans for summer school for both our K through 8 Title I summer school and what that will look like, as we've had to shift very quickly from what was going to be a regional program and obviously face-to-face to a spreading it back out to all of our Title I sites now in a remote learning world, and taking a look at some of the online remote curriculum and extension of what we're doing this quarter. Secondary high schools will all be participating in online learning summer school through MDLP and capitalizing on helping to fill some of those gaps as we know that kids are going to be struggling in this new world. And so how do we continue their learning and make sure that we're prepping them to be ready for next year? And we'll have some advancement courses where kids can move forward in capitalizing on credits, but also credit recovery programs through that. So our high school folks have been working closely with our MDLP staff. Our community ed teachers have been trained by MDLP as well as they transition through that environment. And really personalizing learning for kids with modules that teachers can choose and select based on the proficiency of where kids are and help them to move forward and progress in their learning. And then our next steps, where are we at right now? So we're in the midst of learning this new world and implementing and connecting and ensuring that we're identifying what's working well, what's not working well, and then how will we move forward knowing that should we return in the fall, what will that look like? It'll be a lot different. And so how are we going to intentionally design learning with a blended learning opportunities, with integrated instruction? If we're closing, periodically, what does that look like as we're designing instructional units and really ensuring that we're capitalizing on student strengths and needs? So our teams will be working with our leaders in helping to think about what does that instructional design look like in alignment with where we're headed with the Portrait of the Graduate and our strategic plan and meeting the Mesa Public Schools promise. So those are our next steps and where we're headed. Questions?
Thank you, Dr. And we will continue on with special education and Mrs. Baca.
Good evening, everybody. Tonight, I wanted to take the opportunity to highlight two of our really hardworking groups. We have our instructional coaches and our speech therapists. So I just want to share a little bit about how they're collaborating with and supporting our teachers. So when I reached out to to Lindsay Massey and said, share with me some highlights that our coaches are doing out there in the field. And they submitted an entire presentation of 12 or 13 slides, which I don't have time to share. But down at the bottom of this first page is a link to a full presentation on our instructional coach work the last several weeks working with teachers. But here is our amazing group of instructional coaches. They recently sent this photo out to all of our teachers, and it says, we can't promise to fix all of your problems, but we can promise you won't face them alone. So we know that working alone, working in isolation is extraordinarily hard on our teachers who usually have the joy of being around students every day. So we don't want them to feel isolated. So our coaches continue to work in collaborative learning teams every week with every teacher out in the schools. And our speech therapists also are collaborating with our teachers. Nathan, if you want to go to the next slide. So they're working hard creating lessons and collecting lessons for teachers to be shared across the district with their colleagues. And as you can see here, there are examples and live links that teachers can go to this resource and see lessons that they may want to share with their students. So it's a very collaborative process, not only with school teams, but with, district-wide with our special education teachers. Our coaches are creating these virtual resources. They have developed parent guides and how-to videos for our parents to stay connected. They're collaborating with our software company for representatives to provide ongoing support for teachers. They're creating professional learning trainings for our instructional assistants. So recently our instructional assistants have access to 3 different trainings. It's IA1, IA2, and IA3 trainings for them to work on and be prepared when they come back to working with students. Looking forward, our coaches are working to adapt the Summer Institute, ensuring that our teachers continue to have learning opportunities in the summer. And I think one of the really fun ideas or things that they're doing is that each week, district-wide, we have a tip of the week for our special ed teachers. And a recent tip of the week was to reach out to parents and encourage our parents to take courses through the Parent University to continue to keep that connection with our parents and their learning moving forward. Nathan, the next one. And here is just another, a big shout out to the full collaborative effort with our coaches and especially our teachers. So as we do these updates, I'll be sharing this data from our Freckles software. And you can see that now in the time period between March 13th and April 24th, that our students have completed 147,000 sessions on Freckle. There are 909 teachers using the program. Down here is the average grade level growth in that time period, 0.39 for math and a 1.12 for English language arts. So we're seeing some significant benefits to using this program, which is based on Arizona standards. And here are the minutes on Freckles, 6,700. And the number of active students enrolled taking sessions is 6,405. So throughout this time that we're away from our students, we're collecting this data and really surveying our teachers on their response to using Freckle in this platform. Nathan? So here are just some highlights of comments shared from our teachers and our principals about the support that they are receiving from our coaches. And so these are just, if you want to take some time, there's some great shout outs here recognizing the hard work of our instructional coaches. Nathan? And here are speech therapists. So the challenge for our therapy providers is that many of our students, we had not done teletherapy. So this was a completely new process and learning experience for our speech therapists. I think the challenge for our families, and I mentioned this a little bit before, that many of our families not only receive therapy through school, but receive therapies in their home. So students are often getting double therapy to close that gap and to keep their progress moving forward. So our families have lost not only their therapy through school, but many of them, all of them, have lost their in-home therapies too. So being able to provide teletherapy and keep that connection with our families is extremely important. So you can see here that we have had collaboration and working with Freckle, Teachtown, and Unique. Our speech therapists are supporting that work of our teachers, and that they're consulting with teachers on the materials that are being sent home and on the remote learning platforms in order to ensure that there is that connection to both the academic goals, but also to their therapy goals. And you can click on these links later if you're interested in some more information about the resources that are provided. Of course, it's important for us to keep that connection to our parents. We know that now they are they're co-teaching with our teachers as for their students. And so ensuring that our parents know what the goals are and how the process and the remote therapy or the teletherapy and the IEP goals, how all of that goes together to ensure that their student continues to make progress. And the telepractice, You can see here that many students are beginning to receive their services in this platform, and that some are doing some group therapy with small groups of students, which gives the opportunities for students to have social connections to their peers and see them in the Google Classroom platform. And here you can also click on these and see some examples of those activities with our speech therapist working with their students remotely. So I just want to say everybody is really just wrapped around, I think, each other, their colleagues, and our teachers to ensure that nobody feels alone in solving their problems, and that it's a big group effort from the special education department. So a big shout out to our teachers, to our instructional coaches, and our speech therapists.
And moving to our next slide, focusing on learning resources, David Sanders will give us an overview of technology.
Thank you, Dr. Portless. So we've had many discussions about collecting or not collecting devices at the end of the school year. So we made the decision to allow students to keep their devices throughout the summer. We feel that this will help promote continued formal as well as informal learning. Hopefully, it'll provide the opportunity to allow students to remain connected with what's happening and maybe even read a news article. Because of the uncertainty of what the 2020-21 school year could look or will look like, allowing students to keep their devices throughout the summer will also help us streamline any modified schedule and handout for the fall semester. We currently have about 15,000 devices assigned to underclassmen at the high schools. So by not collecting the devices means that we will have 15,000 less devices to hand out if there is a modified startup next fall. It just didn't make sense to collect the 15,000 devices and then turn around the next month and hand them back to them. We are, however, collecting devices from graduating seniors and students not returning to Mesa next fall. At this moment, our plan is to start the collection process no later than May 18th, and then also depending on what the school wants to do, if we want to do it before that. So seniors and non-returning students will be required to return their device. Any questions?
Thank you. So I'd like to offer an opportunity to pause for a moment and just ask any questions to the team about learning resources, whether it's professional learning, general education, special education, or technology.
It might be a rare opportunity here that I'm speechless. I am so impressed with what has been happening in learning, special ed. This is terrific work. Thank you so much. Oh my God.
As I am looking at this, it looks like it's also very adaptable to whatever circumstances that are coming down the pike. We are uncertain what's like, David, what you said about what it's going to be in the fall, what we're going to be looking at. But it appears to me in all of these areas that we reviewed this evening that you're anticipating some of those uncertainties and how you can blend this with in-school teaching as well as remote teaching, and having the education for our teachers to prepare on whatever mode they're going to be teaching in next fall. That gives me hope that the transition next fall will be much easier than this transition has been for everyone, that we'll have more time and more adaptability for that. I did have a question about the coaches, the instructional coaches, and how they contact or keep in contact with those that they coach. If that's based on who reaches out to them, or is it based on them getting in touch with various people or the teams that they're on? How does that look, Dr. Baca?
So in the PLC framework, our instructional coaches already had collaborative learning teams. So they would meet with their individual, so each coach has 5 or 6 schools. And they have a schedule to meet with those collaborative learning teams every week. So for example, if you're at Eisenhower and you're a special ed teacher at Eisenhower, you would have a Tuesday meeting for 45 minutes and meet with your coach. So we continued that same schedule. So our coaches now meet, you know, in a WebEx setting versus going to the school and meeting face-to-face with teachers. But really, there was no disruption to their schedule that they had had all year up until the point of our closure. So it was just moving to a different format, but the schedule remained the same. And they continue to be available just, you know, pretty much any time an individual teacher runs into a challenge or needs additional support. The coaches are available to them, you know, pretty much 24/7, and they have established some really strong professional relationships through this process.
Great. And I believe I called you Dr. Baca, and I just graduated you as well tonight. There's a lot of people that have been graduated, but thank you for that. Thank you. That's all the questions I had. Anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, I did have a Scott Thompson question. Is he still around?
I'm here.
Okay. My question is around, I know there's been a lot of discussion around funds and savings around energy, and now that our school's not in session and what's going with that. And I know being budgetary, you're thinking about all of this in the back of our mind. I know there's concern about devices and loss. And is there, with energy savings and the cost savings that we have, the plan that, because I know you're ahead of the game, there is a plan for that. At one point, would you kind of tell us what ideas that you have around the cost savings and what things that we are spending money on, where, you know, kind of where things are going to be juggled and basically benefit the district? Because I know you're thinking about it. I know there's meetings behind the scenes. So I've just kind of been thinking about that specifically when you look at, you know, loss of devices and costs and all those different things. So kind of in my mind, I'm like, well, $100,000 is being saved in energy here. So maybe this will be here and this and this. And, you know, on a simple level, right? As somebody who don't do complex budgeting for the entire district. So I've kind of been thinking about that. Is that something that you could maybe do a presentation to the board regarding?
Certainly, I can do an update at the next meeting on some of those savings and what we're achieving. $1,000 a week in energy savings. We do need to be in our schools doing some work, so that's going to vary by week by week. We are anticipating savings as a result of not purchasing as many materials and things right now for in school. And so we're continuing to collect that data. And of course, we're also at the same time looking at what's going to be available to us through possible stimulus funding and things like that. So we can do more of a deep dive on that at another time, but we do continue to track the savings as best we can. Of course, it's an evolving situation right now.
Mr. Thompson and Mrs. Sears, I may add just a few other things that I think are relevant to the school closure, is that we're not transporting students, so we are saving several hundred thousands of dollars in fuel costs. I believe, Mr. Thompson, if I remember, our estimate was maybe around $600,000-700,000 for the duration of the closure. And I think from a human resources standpoint, that we're probably not hiring positions that we otherwise might be hiring at this time of the year, where maybe the vacancy savings are at a greater rate than we would see in regular years when we're open all year long.
Dr. Les, unprecedented times, and the ability for us to kind of compare what the past looked like and what today looks like, nobody really anticipated ever having to look at it the way we are today. So we didn't have necessarily mechanisms to say, okay, what do we typically spend in the week of last week of April? So we're doing our best to try to put those numbers together and get a beat on where we're going to have savings. And we continue to evolve that throughout the year here to the end.
Mrs. Sears, it may make sense as we bring back the budget matrix at the next meeting. That may be the perfect time to focus on what some of those savings might be as we discuss, the next steps in the budget.
Absolutely. I wasn't, expecting so that's why I directed with Scott. Just have the back in my mind, especially when we talk about devices, and definitely want all students with those, but they're little people with little devices. So I know we have to look at what the cost is and have some kind of some projections about retaining the devices that we retain after we get back to our next normal.
Absolutely. We will include David Sanders. I know he holds similar concerns about return of devices whenever we do collect those devices back in this process. But I would tell you that, David, if I have this accurate, that you had mentioned that nationally people lose 10 to 12% of their devices. The stellar results of your crew is maybe around 5% under normal conditions.
Yes, Dr. Leslie, David. So yes, it is, the national average is about 10 to 15% loss. Our last 6 years, it's been about 4.25, not 45, 4.25% loss. And it's mainly those students that just, they just pick up and go and we don't hear from them. And that's pretty much what that has been for. But this is, we're in a different circumstance now, so we're not sure what it's going to look like. But yes, that's going to be our goal, is to make sure we get as many of those back and make sure they all come back as much as possible.
Dr. Lesser, if we'd like to move on, I will take us into employment matters, unless there's any other questions related to learning resources. All right, Dr. Holmes, if you'd like to share some updates with us about around specific to employment matters within Mesa Public Schools.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Forlis. So on the slides, I've simply repeated the communications that we have sent out with one addition, and that is related to employee attendance and pay. I will share with you that around the district, we have had leaders reaching out to human resources to ask for guidance when employees are they're not responding. So we're expecting them to be available for work, and they just are simply being unresponsive and not working. And currently in this current environment, we are continuing, as you know, to pay everybody. And so the simple answer to that, quite frankly, under normal circumstances, would be to just simply follow our leave policies. That said, we recognize as a leadership team that we are in extraordinary times. There's a lot going on out there. People have a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety. Our work worlds have been entirely upended. So I'm going to say we've been slow to take the stand on. We're just following our leave policies, and as we've discussed it, we believe that is what we have to do. But the first step really is to recommunicate out to folks, to our people, what the expectations are. And I think to provide, and also to provide some greater detail and clarification on what we mean by you need to be available to work and be responsive to your supervisor. So the first step in doing that, we did tonight. We've communicated out with our leaders, and shortly to our we'll communicate to our employees. And I want to just share with you the expanded list of I'm gonna say the list that clarifies our earlier defined expectation that folks need to be available to the organization during the normal business day. And there were 6 things that we identified specifically. Employees will confirm the exact hours of what is considered the normal business day with their supervisor. Based on a full-time job, a normal business day is 8 hours, not including a half hour for lunch, and time can be flexed on the approval of the supervisor. Number 2, employees need to respond to phone calls and email related to organizational business within 24 hours. Number 3, employees are responsible to complete their normal work assignments or alternative work assignments as determined by their supervisor. Number 4, employees need to complete work assignments on the timeline established by their supervisor. Number 5, employees need to respond to their supervisor within 90 minutes of an attempted contact. So we are differentiating between their responsiveness to the organization or public at large and their responsiveness to their supervisors, immediate supervisor. And then finally, employees need to be able to physically report to work if requested by their supervisor on a 90-minute notice. So this means that their remote location must be close enough to their physical work location. Their remote work location must be close enough to their physical work location to meet this expectation, unless the supervisor provides prior approval for an exception. And you can imagine this is addressing the notion that some people would find it very convenient to work from wherever they might want to work from in the world, quite frankly. So those are the 6 things that we're communicating out, and then we're going to remind folks that, you know, employees continue to be paid as long as they're meeting the expectations as I just outlined. Or if they can't, if they need to take a leave, then they have a leave balance defined in our board policy, specifically GBBD and the related regulations, and that leave is approved by their supervisor. So going forward, as we contemplate that, our current situation may be a long-term situation that even as we get into next year, normal might not be normal, and we're not sure what that looks like. But we, you know, when we listen to the news and experts talk about this situation, it's not hard to imagine that we're in some sort of alternative employment capacity for at least the next year. It really does become important that we have established policies that address these matters, that we should follow them, that this is not new. We have had we've been following our policies with respect to leave. We should continue to do that. But in these extraordinary times, you know, before we implement that, as we have in the past, we feel like we've gotten over this. We've gotten through, I'm going to say, the initial phase of being upended and the anxiety with work being entirely different. And what we need to do is remind our employees first before we implement that. And so that is what we intend to do. That I'll take any questions that you have about that.
I do have a concern about the actual 90 minutes showing up. Is this for all employees?
Yes, it would be for all employees. And the notion there is that, you know, we have had some people that, you know, want to be in another state, for example, or you know, they have another residence quite a ways from here. And, you know, they may be in a position where we need them to report to work physically. So the notion there is very simply that we want to make sure that we set a standard for that, so that our employees understand that standard. And if they want to engage in a discussion about altering that standard, we are providing them with the opportunity to do that with their supervisor. But we do need to provide some standard for that. Otherwise, we get into any number um, of issues where, you know, an employee is, you know, makes decisions that, you know, that don't allow them to meet their work expectations. And we haven't provided them with any framework for that. So that's the intention, is to provide an expectation and a framework.
Dr. Holmes, if I may just give a few examples of what that might look like and why that is, it's necessary to state that and put some parameters on it. There's a possibility that we have a plumber who is not presently reporting to work, and they're not doing their plumbing responsibilities at home. Maybe we have them doing some other appropriate responsibilities, but let's say a water main breaks, and we need to be able to call that plumber under safety protocols and appropriate, that we have physical distancing and the right gloves and masks, that we may need to have them come in and repair the water main as part of their job responsibility. Or there may be a circumstance where, in the process of facilitating something at a school, where a principal may say to their secretary who is working remotely at home that we need to do the following with our staff, and they may need to come in and do something in a physically appropriate manner with the right safety protocols in the main office by themselves to make sure that we get that particular work done. So being available to be called to a location to do your job is absolutely an expectation that is essential, but it is in the mindset that we want people to work at home. And there may be some times where they have to come to a location, and they can't be in San Diego when we call them.
And I'll provide just on the other side of the spectrum, Ms. Sears, just to provide you some more context. You know, I had a request come across my plate where an employee had a family need to be in California, and had requested to, you know, it had made the case to the supervisor that all of the work could be done remotely from California, and that there was no need to come to work for any reason. And the supervisor concurred. Didn't see any reason why that couldn't be the case. It's not for you know, forever. It's for a limited amount of time. And so, you know, we granted that employee the flexibility to. We understand that employee is now in another state, but doing the work that they've been asked to do. So I use that as an example because the communication is meant to provide a framework. But there's built-in flexibility there, and that's an example of the kind of flexibility that we are providing guidance on for our leadership.
And Dr. Holmes, we've got one more slide to talk about keeping our employees safe and benefits, and then we'll move on to facilities.
Yes, and actually, you know what? Actually, I want to mention under safety is actually not what's listed there, but we have thinking about the social emotional safety of our employees. So one of the things that we are going to start doing is we're going to begin surveying our employees for their own emotional well-being, if you will. This is something that our partner Qualtrics had reached out to us and to R&E specifically, and and had developed a survey for this purpose. So we're going to start reaching out to our employees and to just assess their own emotional well-being in these times where we know a lot of people have some anxiety and disconnectedness. And we're hoping to establish some baseline data that may, influence how we provide supports to our employees as we continue on this journey. And much of that, we can't provide details on now because we're just going to begin to start doing it. But that is something that we are going to begin doing. And so thank you to Helen and Research and Assessment for acting on that opportunity.
All right, thank you, Nathan, for bringing up the last slide around employment matters. Dr. Holmes, is there more to say about employee safety or employee benefits?
That is, oh, actually, one last note there. We are in an open enrollment for employee benefits, and that will be through May 7th. And that is it for employment matters.
Thank you very much, Dr. Holmes. And moving on, Mr. Scott Thompson to talk about facilities.
Good evening, everyone, again. Real quick, basically what I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of is that you might start seeing more activity surrounding the campuses, particularly around construction. We have re-engaged our contractors. Things did go, of course, on pause for a little bit as we all adjusted to this new reality. As a result, the projects that were presented back in November and December, those are our focus, obviously, primarily those bond projects for the summer. What we're finding is that with the new normal, some lead times on equipment might be outside of the scope of being able to be delivered by the start of school. So while I don't have specifics yet, some projects may have to be put on hold and wait till next year, simply because we don't have the confidence that we can have the work done and be ready for August. We're continuing to evaluate that. It's kind of a daily discussion right now, and I'll have more detail in the future. We, of course, are asking all of our contractors to provide a plan for keeping themselves safe and keeping our staff safe. Nathan, next slide. On grounds and facilities, not a lot new, just a lot of folks out there. It may seem like, we're on pause, but we've had water main breaks. Plumbers have been out addressing. As Dr. Lesser used as a hypothetical, it is a reality. We've had HVAC units with issues as we start to heat up. Of course, we are still air conditioning kitchens where food service is going on. And this week, we're air conditioning the entire campuses as staff comes on campus to pack up their belongings and prepare for the end of the school year. With the rain, we had leaks, electrical issues, as I've mentioned before, buildings. Even though they may be vacant, they still need a lot of attention. So staff is continuing to address those issues. Custodial staff has been busy cleaning throughout the district. This week, as I mentioned, staff will be in and they are cleaning after the day is over, more like their regular schedule. Again, doing so in a safe environment, we're providing them with masks and doing our best to keep all of our staff safe throughout this process. And that's it for facilities.
Thank you, Scott. Any questions?
I just wanted to ask, I think you've said this before, Scott, but our campuses are still being checked every day. They're not just sitting there empty, vacated. They are having staff going in there and just checking regularly to make sure there aren't leaks or something happening unbeknownst to us while there's no one going in and out of there every day. Is that correct, Scott?
Yes, externally, our security staff checks the outside of all buildings every day, looking just to ensure there's no vandalism, nothing else occurring. We do have, currently we have staff on the campus every day right now. A few weeks ago, we were walking every part of the building at least once a week to check for any leaks or things of those nature. So yes, we're doing both. At least weekly interior and daily exterior, and sometimes even more than weekly interior because folks are just on the campus. And anytime we have facilities assistant or somebody on campus, we always have them walk the entire campus for that day.
Okay, thank you.
And Ms. Loria, if you would like to walk us through community partnerships.
Okay, good evening, Board President Minor and board members. One of the most glaring disparities that we knew existed pre-COVID-19, but has been really exacerbated by this crisis is what we call the digital divide. You know, families that have access to technology and internet and those that don't. And unfortunately, it's a division that runs parallel with socioeconomic status. We know that in a remote learning environment, online instruction provides many more enrichment opportunities that are so much better than just a one-dimensional packet. We also know that having a device not only gives access to learning resources, but it's also a lifeline for other social services that a family needs access to. We've done some survey data, and currently we show over 7,000 students in our school district do not have a personal computer in their home. Thankfully, we are a one-to-one at the high school, and that we've also checked out computers to our junior high students who need one. But we know if there's only one computer in a home with 5 siblings, that device is going to get stretched pretty thin in who's being able to access it. Thankfully, we have amazing business partners and community partners that have really stepped up to really help close this digital divide. First of all, we got a phone call. Helen Holmes got a phone call a few weeks ago from the Maricopa County Superintendent's office, Steve Watson, that they had 69 devices that they wanted to donate to our students. These devices were actually recommended from teachers. They actually submitted an application on behalf of a student, and they range from iPads to MacBook Pros, Lenovo's, Dell's, etc. We have received those devices. We are now checking in with families to make sure, that the parents know that their kid's getting an iPad. And then working with Todd Wallace and her amazing community ed staff, next week we'll be getting those devices actually hand delivered to the family. Now, these devices are not owned by Mesa Public Schools. They're a complete donation, again, made through the superintendent's office, but also through the Phoenix Chamber of Commerce, AZ Strut, and I believe Data Doctors as well. In addition, I've been working with some other nonprofits, one called School Connect, who's been partnering with Computers to Kids to get additional computers donated to our students. Computers to Kids is a nonprofit in San Diego that refurbishes Lenovo computers and sells them for $110 each. This Lenovo comes with Office 10, antivirus software, and free technical support for a year. And I've been working with Janita Gordon, the executive director of the Mesa Education Foundation, to raise money to purchase these devices for our students. Thus far, I got an email earlier. She believes she's secured over $40,000 in donations that will be earmarked specifically for this program. We are going to be starting a small pilot next week with 190 computers that will be with homes in Emerson Elementary School. The fabulous thing is there's a representative from Computers to Connect who will come and help get the families, make sure their device is working, get them registered, make sure we have all their information. And then we will also have Cox Communications there that the students will, or the families have already been pre-qualified for internet access. And there will be a representative there to make sure that their computer and their account and everything is set up. And then with the Cox to Connect program or Cox Connect to Compete program, they get free internet until July 16th. And then after that, it's $9.95 each month thereafter. We'll also be distributing devices to our homeless students in our Salt River Maricopa Indian community. Now, these students have limited access to Cox, so we are partnering with AT&T, and thanks to Mr. Hutchinson for helping with this partnership. We are going to be piloting a mobile internet bus that can push out Wi-Fi by 200 feet. So you kind of think of it as a mobile Starbucks minus the coffee. We will have a bus on a schedule, and we'll be able to park it into communities that are densely populated with students, so that during a certain time, 8 to 10 a.m. on a Monday or for a couple hours, they can have their device connect to the what we're hoping will happen, and then be able to get the learning resources they need and or access to other services that they may need with that device. The second big initiative we have going on is with McKinney-Vento, which are our homeless students. We are focusing on our families that are living in motels off of Main Street from Power to Dotson Road. We have identified about 250 families that are living in these motels. And through all of the crisis, we know that they've been getting some resources, but probably not to the level that they are used to getting, being able to go to their homeschool every day. So working with Rita Rodriguez, Michelle Grimaldi, Todd Wallace, Michelle Hamilton, Jeannie Vandermark, and many others, starting this week, we have turned the Mesa Education Center into a distribution center to receive food, hygiene products, and learning resources. And starting Thursday, we will get those all organized in bags. And on Friday, our transportation department will pick them up, and they will be delivering them to the motels, to the students and families. We have all these fabulous partners from Midwest Food Bank to, we've worked, obviously with AZ Brain Food. Amazon just contacted me this week and said, hey, what do you guys need? So we're trying to get some more hygiene products donated. So this week will be our first go at it in trying to get all of these very crucial materials to our students. And then if it works well, they will be getting these items on a weekly basis for however long we need to continue giving them those resources. So that's all I have for community partners.
And moving on to policy, Dr. Eastless, these are all your items for this meeting's updates. So I'll turn that over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Farless. Yes, President Minor, members of the board. These are some of the policies that we have either had to recommend for you to revise the policy, suspend the policy, or some of the items that we, based on the State Board of Education recommendations and due to the school closures, have had to kind of do some work around. So I'll start with the PE requirement and civics test. These are just a couple of requirements for our seniors that we're looking at for graduation, and per the memo to the governing board that we were asking you to allow us to provide a waiver for the PE requirement, which is a Mesa Public Schools requirement for graduation, not necessarily a state requirement. And with that, in general, students who have 22 credits but may lack that PE credit, we are asking that our seniors, they could waive that credit and still be allowed to graduate. The civics test is required of our seniors as well as a state requirement for graduation with a 60% proficiency rating. And our State Board of Education has recommended that if there are students who, due to unforeseen circumstances, cannot pass that exam or are unable to access it, that we would waive that. Our district has opened up the window for the civics test about a month earlier than we typically do, and our teachers have been contacting those students who have not passed that civics test, and we are providing multiple opportunities and ways for them to do so, whether it be through the Canvas course or even proctored through a phone call where the teacher is assessing the students that way if they don't have access to the internet and so forth. So we're providing multiple opportunities and taking those case by case. Our grade enhancement policy is being suspended due to the the cancellation or suspension of the AZM2 state assessment. And so therefore that has been suspended this year. Many of our teachers are making modifications to the final exams. As you recall earlier, when we launched phase 3 of our teaching implementation, we wanted to ensure that our students will either maintain or improve their third quarter grades. And so therefore we've had to make some modifications to the grade book and how those may be weighted. Governing board policy requires that final exams are no more than 20% of a student's grade for the semester. And so we've made some modifications to ensure that students are not declining in grades. Project Mesa is our sexual education program, and in our course cataloging policy, our 7th and 9th graders participate or opt into these courses, and our 9th graders were already through those courses the first semester. Some of our 7th graders have gone through third quarter, but our folks that were our students that were scheduled in fourth quarter will be suspended until next year, those courses where they can opt in, and our teachers have already been preparing to modify their schedules so that those 7th graders who may have missed it and want to participate will do so in the fall. And then assessment modifications, part of our policy again is a testing program. And in our district, we do have benchmark assessments, and due to the school closure, we have canceled those end of year exams. And so those are some updates to some of the policy modifications that we've had to make due to COVID-19.
And in the interest to continue on, I'm talking about end of the year celebrations, and we will start with Mrs. Williams, who will talk a bit about high school graduation.
Thank you, Dr. Porlis. I've been working closely with make sure that we're graduates at the end of this year. When we received the stay-at-home order from Governor Duty, we realized quickly that we would have to change how we traditionally do graduation. And so we began working and brainstorming together. I think we've come up with some very nice ways to celebrate our graduates, and some unique opportunities for individualized celebrations of the graduates, ways that we haven't done before. So excited to share that with you, knowing that those plans are still in progress and we are working towards what that will look like. For the graduation ceremony itself, it became evident that virtual graduation was something that we needed to plan for, and so we are working closely with a company that we've hired to make our graduations very unique and exciting for each school, honoring the traditions that they have, but also creating kind of a new excitement around them. The company we hired is Vigo Entertainment, Vigo TV, and they worked on projects like American Idol and the Emmy Awards, and so that's a pretty cool resume of work that they've done. We're excited to see what they're going to put together. Our principals have started to be working closely with that company, along with students. We'll be engaged here in the next couple of weeks to plan and decide what will happen during the ceremonies so that we can individually and uniquely celebrate the class of 2020. Some other things we have going on that are exciting include banners for the high school fences to celebrate the class of 2020 provided by our Mesa Education Foundation, which is such a nice honor that people can see as they drive by our schools to honor the graduates. We've also ordered yard signs for each school, every graduate. So thousands of yard signs will be starting to be seen in yards in the next week or so, celebrating the classes from all 7 of our high schools that celebrate graduations. And that's going to be such a great celebration for each of our students to receive one of those. We also have some of our schools doing Thursday night honoring of the football stadium lights so that we can show the seniors we're thinking of them. We have awards events still going on when we honor with scholarships and different kinds of awards on campus. They're creating virtual celebrations to share with their community so that those students can still receive the individual honors that they should and the recognition. And kind of the exciting, I don't know if it's exciting, but an opportunity that we have with the award celebrations is that we can share them more widely than we have before with space limitations, sometimes we can't invite as many people as we'd like to celebrate our students, and those award celebrations can be shared more widely this year. So that's exciting. So a message about what we're doing for our graduates will be shared with our families this week by Friday. We are aware that the Stay Home, Stay Healthy, Stay Connected expires on Thursday, and we expect our governor to give us some more guidance. So as we prepare the message to go home to our families, we anticipate using the governor's guidance this week to inform that message. So parents and families can expect very specific information to be shared from the district by Friday, and then by their individual schools about what their plans are in the coming weeks. But board members, I'd just like to put on your calendar that next week, the 6th and the 7th, if you just kind of make a note, you'll be contacted about taping your piece for graduation for each of our schools. And if you need some special accommodations for that, please reach out to me and we'll make other arrangements. But for now, we're going to schedule you to come in a safe way to one-on-one videotape your piece for the graduate. So I'm happy to answer any questions I can about that. I have a question. Who's going to be putting all those signs up? So that's a great question, Mrs. Miner. So there's a couple of different options that schools are employing. Some of them are doing some delivery, and others are doing it as the students as seniors drop off their devices and their materials that they have to do to check out. They're going to hand them a sign. So it'll be kind of a swap off. So if you give us your stuff, we'll give you your sign, but everybody gets a sign. So, and we've purchased enough for families to make sure they have them. And they're nice yard sign like election signs that can stick in their yard, but they also don't have to have the base, and they can go into a window for those students who maybe live in a complex where they can't put stuff in their yard. So there's options for the kids to celebrate for them. And there's a nice white space on there to be personalized. So a family could write their children's name in the space so that their neighbors know which one of their children is graduating.
When you say widely seen, more widely seen, the celebration, are you saying that if they have grandparents in Michigan, they might be able to participate from Michigan?
Absolutely, that's the plan. It's not going to be it's going to be a widely shared link that they can share with their families, and people can watch it happening. And they'll also have that link to save, and they'll have it forever. So they'll have their graduation ceremony as the class of 2020 forever. So it will be a nice keepsake that they'll have. The principals are all using yearbook photos and other things. So if you remember graduation ceremonies where the principal gives that address about all the accomplishments, our principals are talking about having photos behind them, like a newscast. So when they talk about the championship football team, there'll be a picture of it behind them. So it'll be a more interactive kind of celebration, and students will see themselves reflected in that even more than we can on a traditional ceremony.
That sounds awesome. I know we've all gotten phone calls and emails for people asking, what are we going to do? I think they're going to be really excited about this. I can't wait for them to get the news on Friday. And of course, everyone that's listening today will get a little preview of that. So that's wonderful. Thank you.
Mrs. Williams? Yes. The principals shared with you any, the big thing about being a senior is prom, and have any of them talked to you about ceremonies other than graduation that perhaps they and the students are trying to figure out an alternative way of doing it?
They haven't shared with me anything besides the scholarship and awards ceremonies that they're trying to figure out a different way to do. They felt that was very important to honor those academic and vocational recognitions that they celebrate every year on their campus, and the top 20 students and those kind of things. So they are creating ceremonies and celebrations virtually for those also that can also be shared out widely.
That's very cool. Okay, thanks so much. This sounds wonderful. Not the real thing, but getting close.
We're trying really hard to make it very special. So it won't be what we typically do, but we hope it'll be a very special celebration for our class of 2020.
I know that I had shared at one point with someone thinking that maybe what this looks like for some of our campuses too is, instead of waiting for a or 10-year reunion. Some of the classes might hold a 1-year reunion. So next spring, they get together and see each other, because I think what they're missing is that chance to see that friend, see that person one more time. And so I think it'll be ongoing, the ways that schools look to try to include not only the current year senior, maybe the class of 2021, but include class of 2020 for those who may be still connected and interested in participating. And I think it'll look like a lot of things as we go through time.
Yeah. You mean there might be some opportunities that homecoming looks a little different next year too, right? Because that's an opportunity when alumni come back, and maybe there's a little special mention of the class of 2020. Another thing I wanted to share that I forgot to mention is that one of the traditional things that parents get to take away from graduation is the program with their child's name in it. We are still printing those, and they will get several copies of that with their diploma when those come. So they will still have that memento with their child's name and the program listed and all the things that they would typically have. That's still happening too.
And without having to sit in the bleachers, they're surprised.
You know, it'd be a nice celebration. It's not the same, of course, it's not the same, but I think we're going to try to make it very special.
Holly, I've seen a lot of say, as you talk about how the graduation ceremony is going to happen, and as Ms. Hutchinson brought up the actual prom, I've seen the online things, like, of course, the dress is a big thing when the young ladies who get a dress, and I've actually can share with you some really interesting things I've seen students do, where they actually get all dressed up, and they do like kind of, you know how you're watching a video and somebody tosses the ball to someone else and literally in a loop? They did that with the dresses. So I saw all the ladies, like you see them with that new TikTok. You see the before they get dressed for the prom, and then they get dressed for the prom, and they do the whole thing on TikTok, but it's passed from couple to couple or female to female, that whole thing. And when you talked about the production of that kind of like American Idol or something like that, so definitely it was that kind of thing. I know our schools are really large, but definitely I know this is going to be a big production. So maybe we can even share out and groups can do it. Like for instance, I saw like cheerleaders did it for the actual graduating cheerleaders. Then you had football players, so that just the honoring. So maybe we can even put something together that we actually send to seniors to actually have them, you know, kind of take some ideas and just take their leadership and ownership. Because one of the things about being senior is you actually having input in what all of those activities look like, right? So
yeah,
that's
fantastic
on that.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen some.
I love those ideas. Yeah. I'll make sure to share those with the principals. I know they are engaging with their student government students to help plan these ceremonies, and they've also included their board, governing board liaisons to talk with them about what they'd like to see, and so they can share those ideas with you as they develop them too. But Mrs. Sears, I will for sure share those ideas, and I'm sure that I have teenagers in my house that can help me find samples of them that I can share. So I will do that.
Yes, because I didn't really know what TikTok was. So it was actually engaging with one of the liaison. It was like, oh, it looks like this, and these are the current celebrations going on. So I said, yeah, sure, I share this with someone else, because that's not an app that I have or anything like that.
I appreciate it.
And continuing to honor, really celebrating our students, Mrs. Hollins, will you talk to us a bit about honoring our retirees?
Absolutely, thank you. You know, for our retirees, many of them, this is their graduation of sometimes 20, 30, and on rare occasions, 35 to 40 years of service to Mesa Public Schools. So we've always had a variety of ways that we've celebrated them, and the in-person reception was only one of those ways. So we will continue many of the other things in hopes of letting them know how important they were to us. If you recall, we normally produce and show a video at the retirement reception. We will certainly be doing that and sharing that video. Similar to the graduates, one of the takeaways that the families love is the program that lists their retiree, years of service, location of service. So we will be producing the same thing. We'll produce the program and mailing it to our retirees along with their certificate and of course their keychain, getting them back as soon as possible to spend some time with us. One of the additional things we always do is we always produce a special edition of Mesa Agenda, which is our all-employee newsletter. So we'll be sending out a Mesa Agenda celebrating our retirees. And we're going to go a little retro. When I first started here, we would do a full-page ad in the local newspapers celebrating the retirees and listing them all by name. And we're going to go retro and do an ad in the local papers for our retirees as well.
Thank you. And Mrs. Baca to talk about Special Services Awards.
So we had, many of you have come to the Student Service Awards over the years, and we had one planned that should have taken place last week. So instead of doing the awards as usual, what we will be doing is we will be sending each nominee their award with the letter that of the person that nominated them for the award. So still recognizing our students and our staff, but obviously in a very different format. And it's a really special event for us. So we're a little sad, but we want to make sure that our nominees know that someone out there thought they were very special.
Thank you. And Ms. Loria, if, a quick update on the Career Tech Education Awards.
I concur with Teresa in regards to, I know the CTE department was really sad this year to not do their CTE award ceremony that focuses on honoring students who have completed programs. They have over 1,200 students that would have been recognized last week. But instead, they're going to be mailing them their certificate of completion and then also their medallion that they typically get during the awards assembly as well. So ensuring that they are recognized. Unfortunately, it isn't in a big ceremony at the Mesa Art Center, but they will be receiving something at home for completing their program.
Marlo, just a shout out to the CTE kids that helped with those masks for our health care providers. I saw that in the Mesa Trib. I think it was 2 Sundays ago. And I thought that was really cool that those students did that. And they were our CTE students. Yay. So shout out to them.
Yeah, everybody's been pitching in to help with all of what's been going on. So we were excited to be able to help.
Talk about true project-based learning. Great opportunity. And Dr. Islas, you are going to round out this presentation for us. Young at Art and Voices.
Yes, this is Tracy. Our Young at Art celebration, same thing, is typically scheduled at the end of April at our historic Irving, and unfortunately we had to cancel it this year. The creative arts and performing folks are looking at scheduling a virtual art gallery and something in the fall if we were to return, what that might look like. I did put a link there if you have time later to take a look at a little clip from Channel 10 that was featured just the other day. We had one of our Mesa Elementary students from Hale did her own Young at Art wall. She said that she missed art class so much, and so she started posting art on her block wall of her house and invited the neighborhood kids. And so it's grown, and there's just a little clip for you to watch it time, but her own little Young at Art celebration. With our Voices celebration, again, we're just like others, we're mailing out those certificates and congratulating the awards through the mail and through celebration virtually.
saw that wall. I went there. I saw the wall. It's actually a friend of mine. It's her wall. So I went and looked at it and ran into the mayor. He was there looking at it at the same time. So it was pretty exciting.
Yes, Mayor Giles actually autographed one of her art pieces. Very cool.
Yes.
Well, thank you all for your presentations. And you know, I know that we talked when school first closed about that conversation of, so what do you do when school is closed? We have just spent quite a bit of time updating our community on what are we doing when school is closed. So certainly learning is still happening. The collaboration among this magnificent team and the teams that they support are continuing to move forward for the students and the staff in Mesa Public Schools. So if there are any other questions, we can entertain those now. If not, we'll move on to our next presentation. Any others? Okay. Back to you, President Minor.
Okay, so then we are done with this item on our agenda, right, Dr. Forlis? Then we can move on to the budget update on item 9B. I guess we'll start with Dr. Lesser, right?
Yes, President Minor, members of the board, thank you for allowing some time this evening to really talk about the very important ideas behind our budget and how we're developing a budget for the new school year based on the revenue, based on expected expenses, knowing that the beginning of the year may look a little bit differently than the start of school years in the past. And you might need to stand up and stretch your legs a little bit. I know that we are a little bit late in the evening, but this, I think, is just a really important topic to bring the board to a place where we're at regarding our recommendations for a new budget year. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and let me make sure that I do this effectively. All right, those of you that are out there in WebEx land, do you see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yep.
All right. I'm going to enlarge that a little bit so you can see the numbers. Now, you have seen this matrix several other times, and there are some things in this matrix that are the same as they were 2 weeks ago, and probably even some things that are the same from 4 weeks ago. And I don't want to spend your time this evening talking too much about those items. I want to focus on the items that are either changing or addressing what we perceive to be significant employment, compensation, program concerns within our district. And so the top part of this matrix, where it says M&O revenue, that's pretty consistent with what you've seen in the past. And I would also tell you that what appears on the bottom in the area of capital revenue and expenses is relatively consistent with what you've seen in the past. I want us to spend a little more time moving from where it says on the left-hand side, teacher 5%, to other certified 5%, to classified salary increase, to classified supervisor, administrator, and new position costs. And then we'll talk about what we've done already in the budget and what we're proposing your approval on, maybe as early as the next board meeting, but probably no later than the last board meeting in May. So let me go ahead and describe some things to you. On the teacher line where it says teacher only at 5%, that line signifies a 5% raise for all of the teachers that are part of the definition of the governor's 20 by 20 plan. And the governor's plan provides our district $8.59 million to give a 5% raise to the narrower description of teacher. But when you look to the right of the $8.59 million cost of that, you'll see a number that says $1.309 million. The reason for that is, in order for Mesa Public Schools to give our teachers, defined by Governor Ducey's 20 by 20, it costs an additional $1.309 million in order to do that. The reason why is the 20 by 20 plan identifies a 5% raise based on, I believe, 2017 statewide average teacher compensation. So we make up the difference in getting that 5% raise at a cost of $1.309 million. The line just below where it says other certified at 5%, well, we are recommending that we give all teachers in our district, every individual that meets the teacher description, not by the 2020, but by our description, a 5% raise. And that requires an additional $1.162 million in order to give that 5% raise. The next line, classified salary increase, you've already heard about that on a couple of occasions in our meetings. That is changing a recommendation to change the classified compensation plan to accommodate an increase in minimum wage, but also resolving any compression that has occurred over the last 2 to 3 years in order to honor the value of all of our employees, really, so not half of our employees are making minimum wage. And Dr. Holmes talked a little bit about that earlier in the meet and confer update. Next on our recommended list is the classified supervisors. Notice they're at a little higher rate. They're at a rate of 7%, which comes at a cost of $239,000. The reason why they're at a little higher rate is that we've been really pouring a great deal of money into minimum wage and the classified compensation plan, where now those individuals are making more money. And the classified supervisors who supervise them, we believe 2 things. Number one, providing a 7% raise for that group, as well as potentially changing some of the ranges based on the compensation study that Dr. Holmes said we would have maybe in another week. That line item of $239,000, if we do both of those things, might be $275,000 when we're done adjusting for 7%, as well as any thoughtful changes to individual ranges of supervisors. And then administrators. Administrators, we have a recommendation of a 3% raise, and that would come at a rate of $492,000 in our budget. Not included in there is the superintendent's executive team, because I gave you recommendations earlier that were approved, and that was for compensation for next year for the superintendent's executive team. Does the board have any questions about the explanation or the summary of our recommendations in those areas, which are a little different than the 5, 5, and 5 that we've shared in prior spreadsheets? We're trying to hone in on a more accurate recommendation for a finalized budget that will be approved in June, but we're looking probably by the end of May to get approval for compensation for our employees.
Dr. Lesser?
Yes.
Could you give us some examples of other certified employees? Employees that have teacher certification but are not considered teachers by the state. Who would those employees be?
Okay, I'm going to say that we've got a number of specialists, whether they be Title I specialists that are certified teachers, and that's how they get paid. We have department specialists that are potentially on the teacher. I am going to ask Dr. Holmes if he's got a more extensive list than just those two areas that I mentioned. Dr. Holmes, are there others that you would group in there that would fall into the $1.162 million for a 5% increase of other certified?
I think that's fairly accurate. I do wonder. I think some of our special ed folks may fall into that category. I'm thinking of OTPTs. Probably fall into that category. School psychologists likely fall into that category.
Everybody that's grouped in the MEA agreement would be classified, Mrs. Hutchinson, as a teacher, either in the governor's plan or how we identify them.
And Pete, can I just verify, were you able to hear that?
Yes, I was.
Just making sure. Okay, thank you.
Thank you both.
Mrs. Hutchinson, does that help?
Sure does. Thank you both.
Okay, you bet. Any other questions from the group about those recommendations that I've shared?
Not from me. That to me was pretty clear. Thank you.
All right. Okay, you can always ask questions. I'm going to move on to the next large dollar on this sheet here, which is what we call the new positions appendix. And that's a little over $6 million. And I'd like to share with you what's in that category and other recommendations that we have not yet moved on to date. So we've actually released some of the positions that are part of that $6 million in the new positions. And we've released them because they are allocations to schools, departments, and programs that if we wait to release those in the middle of June, there just won't be the available candidates to hire at that time. And I'll give you some descriptions of those. Part of that $6 million is 6.8 specials teachers in elementary music and PE that will provide access to those areas for more students and provide greater flexibility in scheduling in our schools so we can highlight the performing arts and other specials areas along with the support of academic programming. It gives us some flexibility and resources to our schools. Also included in there that 8 more elementary schools with large free and reduced populations and large student populations, 8 more schools will receive deans for next year. So it's 4 deans, but they will be shared between 2 schools will share a dean. So we are providing additional administrative support in 8 more schools that really need more support. And we've discussed that before. We are adding 12.6 resource special education teachers to help accommodate increasing numbers in special education, the services necessary to provide to our students. I'm sure that will also have an impact on caseloads. We're hiring another gifted and talented teacher because we're expanding that program. We have 2 high schools that we are adding an assistant principal on at each high school because their student enrollments are 3,500 students or greater. We are hiring what we call an EDP team leader, and that is the EDP program in our schools for students with emotional disabilities where this team leader will help support the teachers, the principals, and the programming of schools that have EDP programs. We are increasing the team leader at Shepherd from a 0.5 to a 1.0 position because we believe that the size of Shepherd necessitates a principal and a full-time team leader. We are adding 10.5 counselors to our 11 junior highs, and we're adding a 0.5 counselor to 11 junior highs and a 1.0 counselor to 5 of our 6 comprehensive high schools. You might ask, well, why aren't we adding one on to the 6th? Well, the 6th one has the lowest enrollment in our school district, and they are appropriately staffed based on their enrollment comparable to the other high schools. We are adding on an MDLP counselor, a half a counselor, because we know MDLP will have increased attention and need as we enter a more remote environment. And it may require even more resources moving forward, but that's our initial step right now to add an additional 0.5 counselor. Now we are expanding our preschool teacher program. And I know that I've spoken with many of you about our preschool. And I would tell you that we are doing the right thing with preschool to be able to have preschools in our neighborhood schools so families can take all of their school-age children to their neighborhood school to experience learning and be embedded in the community environment. And we're working on those things to enhance and improve our preschool program, where you've either shared concerns or asked about improvements, or we've had dialogue with our teachers. But we do believe that we don't stop right here. We are looking to expand the program to 7 additional, actually 8 additional schools. A Montessori program, one at Franklin over at Brimhall, and then 6 other expansions to be able to meet the needs of our programming. And then a PE teacher at Sharp, because those students who have not had a PE teacher over there need those services to get up and move and be active and to be part of their programming. So those are areas that we've already released because we need to hire people to be able to hire into those positions to make good on our programming and the needs of our students across our district. So that's part of that $6 million. What I would like to say, and then I will field any questions that you have, I'm going to tell you that there are 5 other areas of recommendation that fill that $6 million. The next part is that the state has changed their English as a second language programming. And we had waited to understand the impact to our district. And we know now that we can meet the needs of our second language learners, but we have to add 9.8 contracts on to meet their learning needs in the new model identified by the state. We are also recommending a $2,500 stipend for all classroom special education teachers, those teachers with kids, those teachers with caseloads. We are also recommending a second 29-hour instructional aid for all preschool classrooms. Now that comes at a cost to the M&O budget in the amount of about $300,000. But we're also adding 18 more instructional assistants from our title budget, which also costs about $300,000. I might mention as well that the $2,500 stipend for all classroom special education teachers comes at a cost of about $1.5 million to our budget. And that is included in the $6 million in that spot on our new positions Index A. The the English language learner costs. That comes at a price of about 10 teachers, probably close to $700,000. And then the last thing that I have in our recommendation in that $6 million in tab A are two things that we believe are essential for our elementary and junior high schools. And really important in this time about student enrollment and taking care of our communities. At the elementary schools, we have a principal, secretary, and a classified office specialist. And we are recommending that the classified office specialist work the same 10.25 contract that the principal secretary does. And at the junior high, we are recommending in our plan that the registrar also be placed on a 10.25 month contract, which is the same as the principal secretary. We will be manned in our offices with at least 2 people at the elementary and junior high that can handle registrations, phone calls, adaptations as we move into a different maybe start of the school year. And we're not only doing it for that reason. If we were not in this health crisis, we would still be recommending these 2 changes to the offices in our elementary and junior highs, because they really are essential to meet the needs of our growing community, answering questions, enrolling students, and just working with our school communities, the teachers, the principals, and parents and students as well. So this recommendation results, all of that information that I've shared with you, if you look to the lower right-hand corner of this matrix, you might say to me, Pete, it looks like we have not spent about $1.77 million of our M&O budget. And you are exactly correct that we have not spent all of our M&O dollars that have been budgeted to us. And I'm going to tell you that our uncertainty about moving into this new school year requires 2 things. Number one, to really try to meet the needs of the varying concerns in our district, whether it be counselors at junior highs and high schools, or more special education teachers, or a stipend to attract and retain, or at least make progress in that area for our special education teachers, or to increase office support for schools that really run lean and mean. We're trying to do that, but we're also trying to say, we're just not quite sure what the future holds with our budget moving into next year. And we think it's fiscally prudent, appropriate, thoughtful, conservative to not spend all of those M&O dollars. Now, 1.7 million, I would tell you, it doesn't do a lot. It probably gives teachers a 1% raise, or maybe it helps us increase the extra factor schedule as part of that. So it doesn't do a lot, but I would tell you moving into the next school year that if we maybe find the state saying to us, you know, Mesa Public Schools, you need to return some money to us because the coronavirus took a $1 billion debt or impact on the state of Arizona. And we're just cautious that we may be asked to return or shoulder some of that burden. And there are other things that we would do. We have cost savings potentially in utilities. We have cost savings for a year in maybe fuel for our buses. We may have additional cost savings in the area of capital or supply money that we're not spending right now because we're closed. There may be additional cost savings in vacancy savings. And all of those things are imperative. But as the superintendent and our leadership team, we're just not convinced that we spend that down to zero. And when we're done with the matrix, I'm going to have Dr. Holmes talk a little bit about another conservative move that we're making right now regarding student enrollment and allocations to schools. But I would like to allow the board to ask questions, reflect on the information that I've shared with you today that is built into this most up-to-date budget.
Dr. Lesser, first of all, thank you for explaining it so clearly and understandable. I appreciate all the work that's gone into it. And I know there's a lot of work behind the scenes in coming up with where our money is put, who needs it the most, because everybody probably could say we need more money. It's like my household. You know, we can all say in my household that we need money in areas. So we have to be very mindful of where we put that money. So what my question is to you is, how do you come up with this? What kinds of a process do you use to come up with these numbers and allocations?
Well, that is an excellent question. And I would tell you that to a great extent, I am the communicator sitting before you today, but we've got a team of people that are really experts in what they do, whether it be how many teachers do we need to have the right resources to special education? What do we need to do in our meet and confer process to honor all teachers with a particular raise? We've got people in technology that are discussing our budget, and two experts in Danny O'Brien and Scott Thompson, and the work of Andy Forless and our area soups who are working with our principals about their needs. I will tell you that probably within maybe a couple of weeks, when I was hired in December, we began to meet every Friday as a superintendent's executive team. And we originally met for a 3-hour period of time from 1 to 4 o'clock. And we began to list and prioritize what we believed the needs were based on all of the superintendent's executive teams' conversations, review of their budget, the needs of their programming. And I will tell you, I've rattled off maybe about 20 things tonight that we've built into the budget. There are probably another 40 that are not on the list that we narrowed down, and I would tell you that they were all important. But we attempted to focus on those things that are closest to the classroom. And that doesn't mean that we didn't need more help in payroll, or we didn't need more support in IT with the growing number of devices that we're distributing to kids. But we attempted to make decisions on what programming, what resources were the closest to the classroom. And hence you see a 5% raise to teachers. And you see classified personnel that are really working in our buildings and working on our schools, and special ed stipends and counselors, and specials teachers, and the work with our office specialists, or the preschool programming, because that's got to be an important thing that we do to continue to grow, refine, and support preschool, because we know that early learning will be at the source of greater success with our kids when they get into kindergarten and first grade. So I would tell you the overarching theme was, how do we stay close to the classroom? How do we honor the great support that we've had from our community with our bond and our most recent override approval of 15%? And you would see the things that I've listed are about kids. They're about safety, mental, and well-being. They're about classroom. It's about special education. It's about support within our school community. It's about recruitment and retention and retaining a great workforce of 10,000 people. I would tell you that is my passionate plea of where we've put our mind, effort, and conversation. And it has not been easy. Like I said, for all of January, February, and March, and now into April, almost completed, we meet every Friday. We've refined it to just 2 hours because I think we're getting better at it, and we're getting it down to a more manageable amount of conversation. And I would tell you probably the last piece of this is the work that Dr. Holmes is doing with all of our meet and confer is also maybe helping crystallize some of the decisions that you see before you today.
So I'm hearing that you're having voices not just from your executive team, but from those who are in the trenches through the meet and confer process.
Absolutely process, or absolutely that's accurate. It's part of our process. And the members of the executive team went down to the people they supervise, who they went down to the people they supervise to try to build up either what they're hearing within the ranks of our schools or the contributions from the meet and confer process. And I would tell you that our area assistant superintendents who are keenly aware of the conversations happening in our schools with principals, that the principals as part of this process are sharing with our teams as well about either what they're struggling with, what the deficiencies are, where maybe the needs are that can support our schools. And that's where some of the work on deans, on counselors, on office help to be able to do the jobs better and more efficiently than we have before.
Thank you. I appreciate that because we as a board, and I'll speak for myself, but I believe everyone else could probably agree, we rely on the fact that when you bring this information to us, that you have done the best you can to hear everything that's going on out there, where those needs are, to assess it, and that those priorities are not because of what a small group of people have decided they believe would be the most important ones, but rather a district that you've pulled from all different directions, meet and confer being a very significant one. That's important to us because I know we hear things from individuals in the district, and it gives us as a board confidence to know that those voices are being heard, not just by us, but certainly to a larger degree to you, and that is not falling on deaf ears. All of these things are on the table and being considered and weighed out as if you do, and it is not as if, but you do state your priorities. And again, I appreciate the fact that that's priority is the classroom down to the needs of the children. So I really like hearing what you're saying and believe that that is the case based on the information we received tonight. I really do appreciate and extend that to you, Dr. Lesser and Dr. Holmes.
Dr. Lesser, can I ask some questions, please?
You're on mute, Dr. Lesser. Sorry, we missed I'm sure we missed some good stuff, but you were on mute.
Hey, Andy, can you guys hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay, all right. I think I got disconnected. Mrs. Hutchinson, I just wanted to mention that if you begin to look at some of the expenditures that are part of this budget, and when our override says we want recruitment and retention of the finest teachers, well, we believe staying true to the 5%, even though it's going to cost us $2.4 million, almost $2.5 million of money that we're not given from the state, then I think that identifies that we're attempting to target the things closest to what the people have spoken about, what our district has spoken about, what the teachers believe are the best interests. Mrs. Hutchinson?
Dr. Lester, I really want to applaud the extension of the office specialists to 10.25 with the elementary schools and the registrars to 10.25, because that is something that the principals have been asking for, particularly to meet the needs of their communities at their individual school. And I think in light of the COVID response that the school district has had, this is good. These are essential people that need to be there with the principal. So I really appreciate that. And piggybacking on your comment about attracting and retaining the best folks, I'm looking at some additions here. So we have an addition of 12.6 special ed resource teachers. We have, I'm not sure if I got the number right. Is it 30 new 29-hour aides?
A total of 36 between M&O money and title money.
Okay. And then we have 8 more preschool programs. So in light of the stipend that you and I have talked about, and I'm delighted to see the stipend in here, I'm concerned that we have 2 programs that are going to be, the quality of those programs are going to be based on, can we get the best teachers for those programs? And that would be the 12.6 special ed resource teachers, as well as the 8 preschool program teachers, because as we know, 73% of our preschool students are and have IEPs. They are special ed students with IEPs currently. But then I'm hearing principals say they can't find special ed teachers. And I heard our own assistant superintendent, Dr. Holmes, say the same thing. So we have a lot riding on 12 special ed resource teachers, 8 preschool programs. Are we going to be able to find those people, and will we be able to retain them? I think that the addition of the 36 29-hour aides is going to help. That is something that our, no matter what special ed level, whether it's pre-K to 12th grade, those folks have been asking for those, and they've been very vocal at our school board meeting, so I'm glad to see that. That will help to attract and retain. But I'm worried about the stipend being enough, because so much is going to be dependent on retaining and attracting the best folks. And so I'm going to ask you to explore raising the stipend perhaps to $3,000. I know it would be, we think almost $300,000 to do that. But then I'm looking at how these teachers are the keystones of these programs, of any program. And frankly, we can't keep losing these teachers, and we need to attract more of them. So I want you to explore perhaps going to a $3,000 stipend in light of the excellent work that you did in restructuring, particularly the compensation of our executive. So, so by next meeting, you could take a look at that. I would really appreciate it, because I'm really worried about attracting and retaining the best for our kids. And I know that the folks that serve those kids are worried too. So we need to do whatever we can to make that position honored and valued.
Mrs. Hutchinson, thank you for your feedback regarding the stipend. And I know that Dr. Holmes, he and I have spoken a number of times over the last several months and even prior to that about working a stipend into some of the positions that we have for recruitment, retention, people stay. And we picked 2,500 because it did cost. You guys still out there?
Yes, we are. We dropped you at 2,500.
Thank you.
Okay, that we know that that's about $1.5 million. 3,000 is at about $1.8 million. 3,500 is about $2.1 million. And what I'm watchful of, just for all the board members, is that number of M&O money not spent. We'll go from 1.77 down to 1.47. And so it's important to know that there's a cost to all of that. And you're right in saying that, maybe that will be the determining factor. We wanted to get at least 2,500 in there, and we will absolutely go back and examine what our budget looks like. And is there a possibility to do that and still be take a conservative approach to the expenditure of our dollars? And I believe that you were right on with regard to retention of employees isn't always about money. Money helps, and I understand that, but it does matter about what kind of support they have. And so the 29-hour aid, I think, will be important to that conversation. I think retooling the potentially the caseload or having that conversation, providing some of the support and coaches to people and deploying resources in different ways, I think is essential to that process as well. So there are several facets that we look upon to be able to meet those needs. But we will, this is the reason for this conversation, is for board members to go, have you done all you can in that area? And can you go back and re-examine that and tell us whether it's possible or not?
Yeah, and I really appreciate your approach to that, Dr. Lesser. And I also want to reemphasize what President Minor said. The meet and confer process is the way in which we can get some very valuable information from employees that have looked at these issues very hard. And when Dr. Holmes meets with them again, perhaps we can get more ideas from them on what it would take. So I love that the conversation is still open. This is still a fluid situation, and certainly you're receptive. We are looking at whatever it would take. And so I really appreciate your efforts and your continued efforts in that regard.
I would tell you our fluid situation is probably within a month of not being fluid anymore. But absolutely, there is still conversation, and I know that Dr. Holmes and I will talk further. And this Friday we'll meet in our weekly budget meeting as well.
Thanks.
Oh, sorry, Marcy. Dr. Lesser, thank you. That is very helpful. I know we have been thinking about these things as you have. And so thank you for agreeing to do that. We appreciate that very much.
Other questions? Mrs. Sears, Mrs. Richardson?
I had a question. I missed the increase in office staff wasn't going to every elementary school, correct?
Our request is that every elementary school that the office specialist will go from, and Arlinda Mann can tell me what this is, but they're going to be increased to a 10.25 work schedule, which is the same as a secretary. And then all junior high registrars who kind of fill that same support role at junior highs.
Great, thank you. I missed that date. I am, this list makes me happy to look at some of the things that we are able to do, and I hope and I am grateful to have the ability to do some of these things. And And I think it will require some good lobby work. I know Mr. Thompson might be able to tell us some of the information about what's going on with the lobby. We're lobbying our state legislators to maybe create some kind of hold harmless year that will help keep our budget stable in light of what's coming up this next year, so that these commitments, because when I look at these commitments are people. These are people we're offering contracts to, and so they have, we need a stable budget in order to honor these commitments to people, and imploring your state legislators to look at holding us harmless for this year as we adjust and readjust to what's coming forward. I think could be important, an important piece of advocacy. And I thank you for all of these steps forward, even though it's not everything everyone wants. It's good strides. So thank you.
Mrs. Richardson, I will be happy to have Scott Thompson just give you a snippet of what he continues to do with the lobbying efforts, and share, kind of where we stand with that. But Holmes is going to share with you what we're doing to not be caught off guard if all of a sudden we have double the students that are not enrolling next year. So we still, I'm sorry that we're getting a little late, but that's going to be a real important conversation to have before we're done this evening. But Mr. Thompson, do you want to just share a snippet of what you're attempting to support on our behalf?
Excuse me, I'm sorry, this is Helen Hollins. I'm just gonna jump in for a moment. We did have when we had that blip, it did take the live stream down. We are still recording and can post the full recording tomorrow morning, or we can pause and try to bring the live stream back up.
Certainly, I would think we'd want to pause depending on what that looks like. Helen, do you have any idea?
It usually is a pretty quick turnaround. That's what we had to do last week, last board meeting when we had the blip. So if we can just pause for a moment, and we'll see if she can get the live stream back up for us.
Okay, we'll do that.
Thank you.
Okay, it looks like we're back online. I apologize for those of you that were watching that we had that pause, but you haven't missed anything. We are going to start up right where it left off and continue with the live streaming. So Dr. Lesser.
Yeah, thank you, President Minor. Scott Thompson, are you out there to just share a snippet of your advocacy about hold harmless and other budget conversations you're having?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Lesser. Real quick, we've been continuing to advocate through different lobbying groups. Most recently, we had a discussion with a lobbying group that we're part of known as EFRG. In that meeting, Representative Udall joined us. We did readdress this hold harmless idea with her. She seems interested and supportive at this time. We continue to bring that advocacy both to the governor's level, but as you may well know, we're not quite sure how the session's going to finish out, whether they're going to consider more bills or not. So we are all waiting to see kind of things, how things transpire here. But we do advocate at every opportunity the hold harmless. It is of great concern to us. In addition to the hold harmless, as I mentioned in previous board meeting, we have run scenarios by which loss of students might be addressed through other reserve funds and things like that. And then, as Dr. Lesser said, Dr. Holmes is going to talk further about some other strategies. So I just want to share the board, we are employing multiple strategies to address the idea that we are in uncertain times.
Any additional questions before I just give a brief introduction to Dr. Holmes and turn it over to him from a teacher allocation standpoint? Okay, President Minor, as I've shared before, I think with the board, we're a little uncertain whether all of the kids that we have planned to return next year will actually return next year. And because of that, it is, we believe, fiscally responsible, thoughtful, conservative in nature to say, well, what does that mean? And how can we counteract or adjust to the notion that not all the kids will return? And Dr. Holmes and our team are presently implementing some work with our teacher allocations that I'd like him to explain, so you know that we're attacking the uncertainty from another angle, not just an angle of what do we save in vacancies, or how much do we save in utilities, or how much M&O do we not spend. So Dr. Holmes, if you could talk a little bit about maybe what we did in your explanation 3 years ago, what we did the last couple of years, and where we've headed now moving into next year. I would really appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much. So as Dr. Lesser just stated, we're implementing a strategy to it's effectively to hold back contract now and build a contingency reserve of contract in the event we need it. But in essence, the thinking is that if our students don't all arrive, and I think there's good reason to believe that that's a possibility, they don't all come back in August, then there are a number of areas where we could be holding back contract now that could potentially offset an event where maybe the state does cut our budget, or if we remain subject to current year funding and have to reduce our budget. So what does that look like? Well, it looks different at elementary and at secondary because we staff our elementary schools differently than we staff our secondary schools. So I'll talk a little bit about both. To Dr. Lesser's comments about what we used to do versus what we've been doing versus what we're going to do, that's an elementary conversation specifically. We used to, and I'll do this by means of example. Let's say you have, we're expecting 94 students in a fourth grade classroom at a school, and the staffing ratio is 30 to 1. Going back a couple of years and then several years prior to that, we would have allocated 3 teachers. And in allocating 3 teachers, your student teacher ratio at 94 students would be 31.3 to 1. So that's well within 10% of the staffing ratio, which is the benchmark that we've historically used. It's larger class sizes than any of us would necessarily want, but it's still within the target range of the staffing ratio. Beginning last year, we started taking a different approach. So we didn't change our staffing ratios, but we changed the way we used the staffing ratios, which is to say, in that same example where we're expecting 94 students, if you divide 94 by 30 specifically, so that would be the number of students divided by the staffing ratio, you get 3.13. So that's exactly how many teachers you need to staff at 30 to 1. But 3.13 teachers is not a real thing. And what we started to do beginning last year was to round that number up in all cases. So in all cases, we rounded up. And so instead of allocating 3 in that example, we would allocate 4. So what we're going to do is turn back the clock a little bit and round down is basically the strategy that we're going to employ. Because if in fact 94 students don't show up, then we will have over allocated. And quite frankly, if they do show up and we're in a significantly altered instructional environment like we are now, then that may actually be okay. I have gone through our staffing allocations and line by line and analyzed where those, I'm going to call them bubbles, where those bubbles exist. where we could round down and stay within 10% on our current projections, which is not considering what they might be. And by the way, we're not considering what they might be because there's just no model for it. The way we go about doing projections is built on some relative consistency out there in the world of the population, and we just don't have a model for what that looks like right now. We are only imagining that it's potentially going to be lower, and if it's going to be lower, then where in the world of our bubbles can we round down? So that's the elementary world. In the secondary world,
Dr. Holmes, if
Yes, sir.
just ask a question now with holding back teacher positions in these unusual places where instead of taking a 3.1 teacher and rounding up to 4, we're taking a 3.1 teacher and rounding down to 3. Nobody's losing their job at this point, correct? These are vacancies, and it just will require a modification or redistribution of what's happening at a school, which will eliminate the potential for rifts if we allocate all of them and we didn't need them. And
that's correct and an important point. I was going to get there in just a minute after I got through the secondary example, but I can go there now. So it's important for the board to know that the reason why we're executing this plan now is because by doing that now, we can do this without affecting current teacher contracts, meaning we don't have to make any teacher an obligatory transfer, and we don't have to conduct a RIF. And that's something we talked about. We do not want to do that. There's already enough anxiety in this new world of work that we're doing, and within our staff, we don't need to create more by going through that. Is our feeling when we can manage this down through attrition. So, what does that mean? Well, in the elementary world, I've targeted about 48 contracts that we could pull, but we're not pulling them all today. We are watching resignations as they come through, and as resignations come through, we are reconciling school staffing within each of those individual schools. So I think to date, I might be at around 15 or so, and we just started on Thursday. Well, actually Friday. So we've actually captured a good chunk of that in just a couple of days. But again, Dr. Lesser's emphasis is worth noting and emphasizing further. We in no way, shape, or form are intending to RIF or create an obligatory transfer situation for any of our teachers. So going back to the secondary example, just so you understand that we allocate teacher contracts on a per student basis. That's very different than how we allocate in the elementary world. So at the secondary world, in the secondary world, we're just reducing schools by a flat amount. And at our larger high schools, that's 2.0. At our smaller high schools, it's 1.5. And in the junior highs, it ranges from 0.6 FTE to 1.0 over, depending on the size of the school. So all said and done, that's a little more than 70 contracts. And, based on some adjustments earlier in the staffing season, I had already been tracking maybe, I want to say 3 already. So we're in the neighborhood of targeting around 75 contracts. And this is the next thing that requires emphasis to make sure that the audience and board members understand. The reason you're not seeing this in the budget matrix is because we are not calling this a budget savings at the moment. It is simple. These positions remain budgeted. They just are not allocated to a specific site at this time. Because if we get into August and everybody shows up as projected and expected, then we're going to have to reallocate those contracts. So that's important for you to understand why you're not seeing it on the matrix, because we are still considering them to be in the budget. Now, if either of the two scenarios that have been described come to fruition, talking about a mid-year budget cut, or we're still subject to current year funding, and students don't show up, then we are very much going to need the savings that we'll achieve from holding back those contracts to reconcile the budget next year. And it's probably worth noting that in my estimation, it is probably going to help. It is not going to solve the potential problem that we have in front of us budgetarily, but it will be but it will help us, and to the tune of in the neighborhood of approximately $5 million. So that's not a small amount. And it's something that we may very much need sometime next year.
And Dr. Holmes, we know that this is not necessarily popular with our principals because they have certainly at the elementary grown accustomed to allocating the rounded up number instead of holding back a contract as we did for 3 years ago and 5 years ago and 10 years ago. But we just believe in the time of uncertainty that it is thoughtful, responsible to resort back to what we did several years ago, to hold contracts. They arrive in our classrooms, then we will allocate. The challenge is, what does the pool of candidates look like when the year begins? But we have weathered that storm before, so it's not unfamiliar to us. But if you're taking the lesser of two evils, we think holding it back at this moment in this ridiculously unprecedented time is the right move for Mesa Public Schools.
That's a good point. And, I think I'd also let the board know that you're right. Holding back contracts is never going to be popular with principals. That said, I will tell you, I have spoken with all 6 of our comprehensive high school principals. I've spoken with each of our junior high principals. I have spoken with all of the elementary school principals that have had contract withheld at this time, and I will continue to speak one-on-one with principals at the elementary level as their contract is impacted. And I think those one-on-one conversations are really important to help principals understand why, to help them think about and imagine what August looks like, and to give them the opportunity to ask questions for clarification. So I would want the board to know that those one-on-one conversations are happening with all of our leaders. I hope everybody just heard that.
Yes, we did. Thoughts or comments from the.
I got to tell you, withholding contracts ain't popular with teachers either, because when the kids come, we're the ones who have the class sizes of 40 and 45. So I understand your position. It's well taken. And it is. We just have to be super careful, and you just don't want to walk into somebody's classroom and tell them they don't have a job anymore. So I very much appreciate the thoughtfulness, gentlemen. Thank you.
I just will add that I appreciate the thoughtfulness in moving forward and preparing for whatever may happen. I do not want to be caught in a situation where we are going to have to do things that are even much more painful. So I appreciate the planning, and I echo what Marcy says. you know, we understand that the teachers will fail if they ended up with more students, but we also understand if we have to pull contracts, how that would impact them as well. So thank you for having planned and put this into place. Thank you.
President Minor, if I could just remember the board or remind the board members, and Dr. Holmes, I see that you're still out there. It seems to me that our target timeline, we would like to potentially bring to the board probably no later than the last meeting in May, a request for compensation that appears on this list, so we can actually, develop all of the right, pay for teachers moving into the summertime, and they're aware of different raises and if stipends are, are the way that we go. Would you agree that we want to get this done before the end of May? So any feedback or questions from board members, I would need you to call me if you have additional questions or concerns about the budget. Dr. Holmes?
I would agree. That it would be great if we could do that by the second meeting in May.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Lesser, we have a few people that have requested to comment. Would this be the right time? Do you feel like you've given us all the information tonight and this would be the right time for that?
Absolutely. Yeah, we have concluded what we wanted to share and the questions we wanted to answer.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Holmes. So, Mrs. Hollins, we are ready for the comments from the public on this item.
Yes, thank you. So we have a number of comments that have come in. I'm going to start with the ones that are specifically related to budget items that were discussed. Then we have several that cross over between this year's budget, next year's budget. So I will read those at the end. I have a feeling the submitters will be fine if they're included in this item and not as public called to the public on a non-agenda item, because they are at least tangentially related to this item. So first, Scott Scavo, his comment: why is administration receiving a 3% increase when the state committed 20% by 2020 for teachers? The next comment is from Andrea Susanto. This is in response to Marcy's questions. Arizona's definition of teachers does not include resource teachers who are not considered to have a student roster. Our caseloads are made up of students who are pulled from a general education classroom. As a resource teacher, I appreciate our district's leadership in proposing the 5% raise to all teachers and certified staff. Thank you. From Kathy Zinkan. Thank you, thank you. Thank you for listening and acting in the best interest of our youngest learners in Mesa by adding a second instructional assistant to all pre-K classrooms. Thank you, just thank you. I think that you know how important this issue has been to me and my preschool colleagues. Thank you for hearing our concerns and helping us provide a better education and more support for our pre-K kids. Thank you for caring about our kids, our staff, and our pre-K teachers. Thank you. From Krista Perhito. Thank you for listening to the community and the teachers to increase the supports to the special education preschool program. It is much needed, and it will greatly benefit our community, especially our youngest learners. As a side note, I will happily pay a higher tuition rate to send my neurotypical preschooler program next year, knowing that you are increasing supports in the classroom. Again, thank you for your hard work and making this happen. I think, let me just double check this last one. This last one is, again, related to the budget that we just discussed, from Vicki Johnson. What is the concern for the quality of teachers we can attract in August if the majority of students return. It seems if we are waiting until the last minute, won't allow us to get quality teachers into these positions as they will be taken by other districts. Then the two comments that kind of straddle this item and the next item, I will read now, if that's okay with you, Mrs. Minor.
Yes, please.
The first is from Judy Robbins. It's a little lengthy, but I think it'll hold to the 3 minutes. This school year, I celebrated a more inclusive and collaborative working special education team that worked toward the needs of changes to special education. I applaud those who have worked tirelessly to propose ideas for those changes and have risked stepping forward to voice concern and worked on the special education subcommittees, the MEA Meet and Confer team, the special education leadership team, and the willingness of the board to hear our concerns. I also hoped that there would be follow-through that matched the rhetoric by the special education leadership to provide special education staff, especially as it relates to itinerant deaf and hard of hearing or vision teams, extra compensation in the form of stipends for the current 1920 school year, and not delay that compensation for the 2021 school year. In the current year, our staff has covered several vacancies, more than doubling IEPs, traveling to uncapped numbers of schools district-wide, and working 9 to 10-hour school days to meet staggered scheduling from preschool all the way to high school. All of this with no additional incentives or compensation provided. Last year's stipends were presented to some certified special education teachers in anticipation of very difficult working conditions, a shortage of needed staff, and high anticipated caseloads during the 1920 school. Some received those stipends, and yet others were presented them but not given. These difficult conditions were not only the result of a, in part, top-down restructuring of special education, letting critical ESI special educator contracts lapse, growing the management team of the special education department, but also leadership making commitments that appeared to be either ignored, delayed, or promised future action, or worse, retracted altogether. Attracting and retaining teachers to our school district is vital, and we've been losing ground for years. Half of teachers' vacancies are in special education. Not only does this impact the quality of education, it impacts the teachers who stay and must carry more of the load. We have 1 month to plead to the board and special education leadership that demonstrating through deeds, not words, also attract and retain quality teachers. Please consider these stipends for this school year and don't delay them. And then the last comment we have for this evening is from Heather Best. During school closures, I have been extremely impressed with all aspects of our district and what they have provided us as we've begun this new territory. Thank you. In consideration of salary increases for teacher only, other certified, new positions, and stipend for special education teachers, I would like the board to be aware of the critical place we are in pertains to some of our most vulnerable students. We have a climate of high caseload counts and growing group sizes due to teacher allocations. Furthermore, we are faced with working with students who have growing emotional and academic needs every day. These needs have grown in light of school closures. These items in the budget are critical in obtaining and retaining high-quality teachers. In the spirit of keeping focused on the best needs of our students, it would be our duty to also stay centered on the best classroom environment for special needs students through examination of the needs in each school as it relates to teacher and IA allocations. And since a final one just popped in, I will add that to my reading right now. Again, Andrea Susanto. I urge district leadership to consider Marcy's suggestion of increasing the stipend to $3,000. The need to attract and retain high-quality special education teachers within our district is of utmost importance at this time. Special education teachers are experiencing high caseloads of 30 or more at several schools across the district. Many special education educators who have been in this field for several years are either leaving the district or switching to general education. I believe that the addition of special education teacher contracts and instructional aides will be beneficial to our students as long as they are appropriately allocated based on the number of students receiving special education services at each school. And that concludes our comments.
Thank you, Mrs. Hollins. I appreciate it. Is anyone, I don't suppose Dr. Lesser, we probably would not be discussing them, or do you want to comment?
Yeah, President Minor, I think what would be appropriate, Mrs. Hollins has all of those. We'll forward those to me, and we will explore the possible either follow-up or resolution or gathering of information that will inform us better about those comments that were shared.
Dr. Lesser,
Oh,
I do want to make I do want to comment a little bit about the itinerant teachers who provide special ed services. I would like to see what the cost is, how many of them are to include them in the special ed stipend, even though they're not assigned a steady class roster. They certainly have a steady roster of students they service every day. So as we look at expanding that special ed stipend maybe to 3,000, what would be the additional cost if we made sure we include itinerant special ed teachers as well?
Yeah, right now, this is Sean. I would just like to comment really quickly. Right now, I just want to remind you that we've provided you an estimate based on, roughly what we think. But tomorrow at Meet and Confer, I expect us to have a conversation about specific positions and what the group thinks about including or excluding, with a focus on services provided to students. And I might just clarify on one of those comments. Somebody had mentioned a resource teacher was not included as a teacher. If the commenter was talking about SLD positions, which are generally speaking resource positions, they actually are included in what the governor would call a classroom teacher.
Thank you, Dr. Holmes. And Dr. Lesser, do you feel comfortable with moving on to the next item? Do you feel like we have?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to all of those who sent in their comments. We always appreciate your comments. Thank you. Yes.
Is there a possibility that Mrs. Hollins could provide us with written comments? Because I couldn't write down everything that people were saying. So is it possible, since they are written comments, is it possible for her to provide us a copy of those written comments?
Yes, I believe that's not a problem.
That'd be great. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
President Minor, I have a request of Dr. Lesser. Dr. Lesser, you said you would kind of follow up with the people who made the comments, and once you've gathered the information and you respond, could you just kind of inform the board? Because at this point, what Marcy's asking for, we'll have the questions, but just to be informed, like this is how this was addressed or handled, or so we could just be aware and have an idea of what happened as a result.
Yes, if Mrs. Sears, if there are comments that are subject to maybe claims of concern or inappropriate behavior, or we didn't pay somebody something, or things where we didn't take care of our responsibilities, absolutely, I can follow up with the board with regard to those things. But there are a number of comments where the individual said, we'd like it to be $3,000. And I would tell you that we'll certainly take that comment, and along with your comments about the budget today. And I would tell you that I probably would not be responding to that person, because we've got their name, we've got their position. Sean knows that that's a concern about a particular employee group or or a discussion that he's going to have. But if there are claims in the comments about conflict or concern about following rules or supporting people or things of that nature, we will explore what those are, and then we will look to try to understand them and then follow up with the board.
Thank you. Anyone else before we move on?
Excuse me, Dr. Lesser, you'll be addressing though our concerns with the next budget matrix at the next meeting. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next item, number 10, is call to the public, and we will begin this item with a video starting right now.
Mrs. Meyer, hello, Mrs. Miner, this is Helen Hollins.
Yes.
I included the one item in the ones that I just read because it straddled the budget. So we do not have any additional comments.
Oh, okay, very good. Then we can skip the call to public since those have been taken care of, and then we will go to the last item on our agenda. And do I have a motion for adjournment?
I move that we adjourn this meeting.
Mrs. Hutchinson moves that we adjourn. Do I hear a second?
Mrs. Richardson moved to.
I keep interchanging your names. Sorry, Mrs. Richardson. Do I hear a second?
Marcy Hutchinson, second.
Very good. Mrs. Hutchinson is a second. Now, do I have a vote? All in favor say aye, starting with Mrs. Sears.
Kiana Sears, aye.
Mrs. Hutchinson?
Aye.
Mrs. Richardson?
Aye.
And Mrs. Miner, aye. So that is adjournment with a vote of 4-0. And thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you both for a good meeting. Thank you to all of you.
Thank you. Good night.